I have created scientific magic. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151 of Is There a Possibility That We Are Fake Legendary Wizards? Unfortunately, the duration of this supernova explosion is very limited. It seems that this gathering can only come to an end. Lin En shook his head with regret and asked the intelligent computer to create some special effects such as space shock. Although Herv could not figure out what the relationship between the supernova explosion and the maintenance of this space was, he couldn't help but feel relieved when he heard the news that the gathering was over. He was also a little worried that if he continued to talk, his knowledge reserve might not be able to cope with the inquiries of these legendary wizards. The two people with different intentions said a few polite words, agreed on the time of the next gathering, and then withdrew from the magic field at the same time. The moment his consciousness completely returned to his body, Herv's forehead was already sweating, as if he had just experienced a fierce battle. It seems to be over. How is it? Did you gain anything, or did you encounter any tricky troubles? Aurora supported her chin with her right hand, stared at Herv, and asked jokingly. It was just to attend an academic gathering, but the other party was so embarrassed, which really made her curious. Herv glanced at Aurora unhappily. He had just made so much effort to prevent the wizarding land from being looked down upon and to preserve the reputation of these legendary wizards. If he had known earlier, he should have let Aurora take the blame. Of course, this was just a rant. Even if it happened again, Herv would not hand over the ring, because those magical theories related to the boundless universe were too fascinating. If there is anything to gain, it is. Herv hesitated, thinking of the magic daily written by Roll, and sighed. I'm afraid the magic theory of the wizarding land is outdated. Aurora paused, looking at Herv in surprise. Is it that exaggerated? Do you know vacuum quantum fluctuations, cosmic radiation and Hubble's law? Herv asked with a sneer. Aurora shook her head blankly. She had never heard of any of these words. What about supernova explosions and the Big Bang? Herv continued to ask. These are all the research of the secret society? Aurora couldn't help but interrupt. She vaguely suspected that Herv had been fooled. They were not completely ignorant of the starry sky. Even if they were a little behind, they could not be completely ignorant of a certain theory. Are you sure they didn't just find some abstruse words to fool you? Aurora questioned. Just now, I witnessed the fall of a star with my own eyes. Herv sighed and shook his head helplessly. Star ... fall? Aurora found it a little difficult to understand. Herv did not keep her in suspense and described in detail the scene he saw after entering the magic field, especially the gorgeous scene of the star expanding, collapsing and finally exploding. The high temperature generated by the destruction of a star can melt all matter, and the flashing light can even light up the entire galaxy. The magic we have is not worth mentioning under such power. The secret society calls this strange phenomenon supernova explosion, Herv said with emotion. The name is very beautiful, but the meaning of this phenomenon is chilling. Herv paused and continued. Remember 30 years ago, we observed a star suddenly light up, lasted for a month and then suddenly disappeared. Now I think that should be the end of a star. Aurora listened to Herv's description and tried to restore such a magnificent scene in her mind. Since stars will also die one day, what about the sun above their heads? Will it also fall? Could it be that the theories preached by the wizards of the Doomsday sect are true, and the world is gradually heading towards destruction? The wizards of the secret society must have developed more powerful far-sighted magic, Herv said firmly. Only in this way can we explain why they have such a deep understanding of the stars and the universe. Only by witnessing it with your own eyes can you perfectly reproduce the scene of a supernova explosion. Aurora nodded. As a legendary wizard, she didn't think that the other party's research progress could be so much faster than hers. The only explanation was that the other party could see more clearly and farther. In addition, I found that the legendary wizards of the secret society were in a strange state. Herv hesitated for a long time and said hesitantly. Aurora was slightly startled, then frowned and asked, What's strange? The feeling they give me is like. Herv considered his words. It's like facing a star, Are you mistaken? Aurora said with a strange look. How could a person be the same as a star? No, I'm sure I'm not mistaken. Prv stood up and paced in the room. After thinking for a moment, an idea suddenly emerged in his mind. Prv stopped and said solemnly in an uncertain tone, "Do you think it's possible that their way of promotion is different from ours? These legendary wizards of the secret society are more knowledgeable and more powerful than him. There is no doubt about this. Now that the opponent has very obvious characteristics that are different from theirs, it is somewhat intriguing." Prv, who has witnessed the explosion of a star with his own eyes, knows how terrifying that power is, so an idea gradually emerged in his mind, whether there is a problem with the way he was promoted. Aurora obviously heard what Prv wanted to express, and immediately stood up from her seat, with magic power surging around her body, and said in astonishment, "This is impossible. Someone has already walked this road, right? If she is really so right, do you think we can still stand here?" Prv said mockingly. "There are essential differences from wizard apprentices to formal wizards, and from formal wizards to great wizards, but there are no essential differences between legendary wizards and great wizards. The only difference is that the magic they release is more powerful and the magic power is more abundant. Even if the legendary wizard can hang up and beat the great wizard of a lower level in battle, it cannot change the fact that the magic released by the two is not essentially different, or they have not found the key yet." Thinking of this, Prv couldn't help but shook his head. Rather than saying that they were legendary wizards, it would be better to say that they were just great wizards who had broken through a certain limit. Chapter 152 How can people become like stars? Compared to Prv, who was fooled in the magic field and was very devoted to the secret law society, Aurora seemed half believing and half doubting. "Since you think we are wrong, what do you think is the real way to advance? Is it to become like the sun?" Aurora retorted coldly. Prv was speechless for a moment, and this was also the most confusing thing for him. According to the deduction of the promotion route to formal wizards and great wizards, there are usually only three ways to gain more powerful power. The first is to control new elements, and the second is to explore the field of microscopic elements. But the problem is that they can no longer find newer elements, and even if they find them, they cannot raise their strength to a whole new level. And the exploration of the field of microscopic elements has almost stagnated because of an accident more than 10 years ago. According to those elemental wizards, they encountered the so-called elemental ghost. This term was originally proposed by the legendary wizard Arctic, who developed the Great Disintegration. It was also after an in-depth analysis of the elemental ghost phenomenon that the most powerful elemental wizard in the wizard land suddenly went crazy, and the research manuscripts left behind were also full of all kinds of crazy words. Prv looked at some of the manuscripts that were still left. The legendary wizard believed that the microscopic elemental world was chaotic and disordered. All the laws of magic had lost their effectiveness here. The state of the elements would become extremely strange, and the speed was extremely fast, so it was impossible to use magic to manipulate them freely. Even Arctic could not be sure whether these elements really existed or what state they were in. At the end of the manuscript, there was a creepy sentence: "It was hiding from me, and it knew that I was observing it." They were ghosts of elements. Since then, rumors that there was a monster called elemental ghost in the microscopic field that could attack the soul and break through the spiritual defense of legendary wizards have also become popular in the wizard land, and the research on microscopic elements can only be forced to stop. Arctic element precision is even known as the limit that wizards can reach. Going further down, it is possible to encounter the blockade of elemental ghosts, and even legendary wizards cannot be spared. With both roads blocked, they only have one choice left: to find a way to improve their own computing power. The legendary wizards of the secret society now let Herolf see another possibility. Aurora was a little upset by Herolf's hesitation. "Since you think their promotion method is different from ours, why don't you just ask?" Herolf looked at Aurora speechlessly. These were just his guesses, and he was not 100% sure. Besides, wouldn't such a direct question expose his true colors? Although he admitted that the other party was far superior to him in the research of the universe and stars, from the standpoint of the wizard's land, Herolf still hoped that both sides would exchange academic issues on an equal footing. rather than one party listening to the guidance of the other party. More importantly, it is not without cost to obtain such precious knowledge. Herolf knew very well that once he was too weak in academic exchanges and could not show enough value, he might be excluded from the next gathering. After all, no academic organization would like a member who always gets things for free but cannot provide any value. Now it is still a long way to go for the next gathering of legendary wizards. It may have to wait until the next supernova explosion. Herv thought again and thought that maybe he could start from Lin En and find out the details of those legendary wizards. At the same time, in the magic field, seeing Herv leave, Lin En was relieved. It is not an easy thing to fool a legendary wizard. Once exposed, the consequences will be disastrous. Fortunately, although there was a small accident in the middle, the overall situation was still the same as he thought. After pulling the legendary wizard Herv into the Secret Law Society, he was completely safe in the wizard land. With the other party's endorsement, no one will doubt whether the background board he erected really exists in the future. By the way, 071, why do you build a small nuclear fusion reactor in everyone's projection? Lin En asked in his mind in confusion. He had noticed this a long time ago, but he was busy dealing with her just now and had no time to take care of it. According to the requirements of the agreement goals, adding high-energy reactions to each unit and creating 4 nuclear reactors can effectively save computing power. Oh my goodness, that's how it is. Lin En's mouth twitched. He originally intended to add a little special effect to the projection of Einstein and others, and it would be best if he could imitate the almost substantial sense of oppression emanating from the legendary wizard. As a result, the intelligent brain actually created a nuclear reactor in the projection of these people. This is indeed high in energy. Lin En shook his head helplessly. He could only hope that the other party didn't see anything. Then, Lin En turned his head and looked at the white dove beside him. At this moment, the girl was huddled on the ground and trembling. The soul projection of the legendary wizard before had a terrifying aura. When the supernova exploded, she felt that her spirit seemed to be dissipated. However, in Lin En's view, it became a middle-aged Marie Curie squatting with her head in her hands. This was awkward no matter how he looked at it, and he quickly asked the intelligent brain to cancel these projections. You did very well this time, Beige. If you were a little braver and spoke more fluently, it would be even better. Lin En walked up to the girl, patted her head, and comforted her. Beige raised her head, without saying a word, and looked at Lin En with a resentful face, looking pitiful. Lin En stretched out his hand, and a storybook 2 fingers thick appeared in his palm and swayed in front of the girl's eyes. The expression on Beige's face changed immediately, and his eyes kept turning around following the shaking of the book, and his pupils were full of desire. This is the first volume of Grimm's fairy tales that I promised you before, take it. Lin En had no intention of teasing the other party, and handed the storybook over casually. The girl took it with great joy and couldn't wait to flip through it. This Grimm's fairy tales was the most interesting storybook she had ever read. The prince who turned into a frog, the kind-hearted Snow White who was abused by her stepmother, Cinderella who attended the prince's ball but lost a crystal shoe. In this dark world with nothing but stars, storybooks can be said to be the source of her happiness. But the black-hearted Lin En deleted the second half of all the stories. Only if you agree to help him act in a play, you can read the second half of the story. Chapter 153 Measuring the Circumference of the Planet. A few days passed in a flash. With the unremitting publicity of the Magic Daily, the news of the pendulum experiment at the seminar and Lin En's plan to measure the circumference of the planet under his feet in mid-July quickly spread throughout the wizard land. This explosive news shocked countless civilians and wizards. No one had ever thought that they could measure the continent and ocean where they lived. After all, the ocean is too vast. Before this, many people believed that the world has no end, but Lin En was doing something that everyone thought was impossible to do, and proposed a logically feasible method, and even proved his planet theory with experiments. So in a very short time, Lin En, the Secret Law Society, and his planet circumference measurement method immediately became the hottest topic in the wizard land. Even those farmers who cultivated the land would mention it when they gathered together to chat to show their profound knowledge. However, The flat earth theory has been rooted in the wizard land for too long. That simple, straightforward, self-centered theory still has many supporters. These people firmly believe that the continent under their feet can never be round. This is all a magic trick by the wizard from the Sea of Mist. But whether they agree or disagree, they all rushed to Greenreel to witness this historic scene. Kevin and Orlando, who had received Philip's invitation early, also arrived in Greenreel in a carriage, accompanied by Darren and other halflings. "Look, that pendulum." Darren saw the huge, swinging iron ball placed in the center of the city as soon as he entered the city. That was the master architect Raphael. With the permission of the Parliament and the authorization of Lin, the pendulum pointer was reproduced one by one, and even the sand table and the scale disc below were exactly the same. The only change is that the ambitious Raphael did not erect a wooden stick on the sand table as a pointer, because he was ready to create a great art that could exist forever. In order to create this miracle, dozens of alchemy masters stayed up all night and spent 3 full days to set up a huge alchemy array under the sand table, extracting all the elements in the nearby space to form a vacuum field. In this way, without the influence of air resistance, theoretically, the pendulum can continue to move under the combined action of gravity and the Coriolis force. Every wizard who walked into Greenreel couldn't help but sigh when he saw this iron ball that could swing back and forth and even deflect without any external force. This is simply a miracle in the history of magic. How long is it until noon now? Raphael looked at the sky. The scorching sun was already hanging high above his head. He asked for the 7th time. There are only 15 minutes left. The apprentices next to him also had excited expressions on their faces, looking at the magic clock nervously. Such scenes were staged in every corner of Greenreel. Everyone was looking forward to it. Those wizards who didn't have money to buy the magic clock were staring at the sundial together, anxiously waiting for the arrival of the last moment. At the same time, an airship was speeding across the vast sea. As early as 11:45 the day before yesterday, the airship had already set off from Greenreel, and under the attention of countless people, it began to sail far away. It has been sailing on the sea for 2 days, which is a full 720 kilometers. Lin En had to sigh that this sea area was so vast that it was unimaginable. He only saw scattered uninhabited islands along the way. In order to increase the rigor of the experiment and to have a beacon to guide the airship when it returns, have also used magic to erect a stone pillar on an island in the middle of the way, and left a wizard to record the data, while the rest of the people continued to take the airship to cross the sea. It should be about time, right? Prv glanced at the magic clock in the cockpit. Now there were less than 15 minutes left until noon. Lin En nodded and looked at the halfling girl who was responsible for driving the airship. "Okay, Lydia, let's stop here. The Overlook has arrived at the designated location. The total sailing time is exactly 48 hours. Let's start landing now." Lydia saluted Lin En in a ship-like manner, and then trotted all the way to turn off the alchemical steam engine that drove the propeller, and then emptied the auxiliary airbags to lower the height. Due to the excitement of the first long-distance mission, the halfling girl had 2 dark circles under her eyes, but she was very excited and didn't look tired at all. Prv didn't wait for the airship to stop and land, and couldn't wait to fly down. Under the effect of the slow fall technique, he landed on the sea very steadily. The wind and waves on the sea were very strong, and the surging waves jumped high and rolled towards Prv. But the next moment, a strong wave of magic appeared on Prv's body, and time seemed to be suddenly stopped. The waves that swept in were instantly condensed into an ice sculpture. Then this force quickly extended to the wide sea surface. Wherever it passed, the surging waves were all frozen into thick ice. In a flash, the entire sea surface had become a huge floating ice island. At this moment, the airship slowly fell from the sky. The few people who got off the cabin saw the strange scene of the sea surface being frozen in an instant. It was like a beautiful ice painting. The surging seawater and the leaping waves were all turned into sculptures and preserved. However, Prv obviously had no time to appreciate any art. With a wave of his right hand, he used magic to cut out a large wide and flat ice surface, and then erected a giant icicle as high as 100 meters in the center of the ice surface. "How long will it take?" Prv shouted loudly. "1 minute. The last minute." There are still 53 seconds, Lydia shouted loudly while holding the magic clock. At this moment, whether on this floating ice island or in green reel, everyone looked up at the sun and felt that this minute was so long. With 10 seconds left, Lin took out the string and handed the other end to her, ready to measure the length of the icicle's shadow. The transparent icicle shone with a strange glow under the sunlight. As the editor of Magic Daily, Roll, who was fortunate enough to get the qualification to ride the airship, was standing on the ice with a crazy look on his face. His right hand holding the feather pen shook quickly on the paper, drawing the wide floating ice island, the towering icicle, the landing airship, and Lin En refusing the rope to measure the shadow length on the parchment. Chapter 154 opens the door to a new world. And Lin En pulled the thin rope straight together, with one end pressed under the icicle and the other end overlapping the shadow. When the magic clock reached 12 o'clock, Rev used his hand as a knife and cut the remaining rope very accurately. "Ruler, bring the ruler," Rev shouted excitedly. He was in such a hurry when he came down that he even forgot to bring the most important ruler. Alok, who was quick-eyed and quick-handed, immediately ran back to the airship and handed the ruler to Rev within 10 seconds. The legendary wizard solemnly took the ruler and began to measure it in sections like a pilgrimage. "Master Rev, how long is the shadow?" Several wizards accompanying him asked with great expectation. Rev did not answer immediately, but measured it repeatedly several times before speaking in a cautious voice. "It's 1051 centimeters, or 10.51 meters. The people who got the data immediately took out paper and pen to calculate it. Although the great wizards who were qualified to take the airship to watch this experiment in person had not systematically studied the mathematical Olympiad, they were still clear about the basic geometric calculation methods. However, this value is not a positive integer. In the case of a decimal, the square root and then the square root will double the amount of calculation. It took more than 5 minutes for everyone to use the Pythagorean theorem to calculate that the length of the hypotenuse is approximately equal to 100.55 meters. Lydia and Alok, who had been trained in mathematical Olympiad for more than 2 months, were obviously faster than them. They had already started to calculate the angle of the vertex, substituting it into the triangle formula. Sine is equal to the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. "I figured it out. The vertex angle is 6 degrees. Lydia, who was the first to calculate it, waved her arms vigorously and shouted loudly. Rev, who did not have paper and pen, got the answer at the same time just by mental calculation. Lydia was not wrong. The vertex angle of the triangle and the corresponding geocentric angle were exactly 6 degrees. The rest is easy. A circle has 360 degrees. The angle between the center of the Earth is equivalent to dividing the whole circle into 60 equal parts. Each part is 720 kilometers. Then the total length is 43,200 kilometers. Rev's voice was trembling. He calculated it several times in his mind, fearing that there would be omissions. After confirming that it was accurate, he said it in a dream. 43,200 kilometers. This is the circumference of the planet under our feet. Lin En was naturally the fastest one to calculate. After obtaining the data of the shadow length, the intelligent brain directly presented the answer in his mind. It seems that this alien planet is slightly larger than the Earth in his previous life. If he remembered correctly, the circumference of the Earth should be 40,750 kilometers. The data of the two are very close. The other wizards also quickly calculated this value. They were so excited that they could not restrain themselves. Once the circumference was known, it would only take time to calculate the diameter, radius, and area. Lin, who was standing by, did not participate in the calculations, but created a new painting titled, "People Measuring the Circumference of the Planet Under the Interweaving of the Scorching Sun and the Ice." The ink-stained feather pen waved quickly on the parchment. Rev, who was measuring the rope with a ruler, Lin En, who was gazing at the sky and seemed to be estimating the angle between the center of the Earth, Lydia, who jumped high, and the wizards who were thinking hard in the back, all appeared on the paper, against the backdrop of the scorching sun and the floating ice. It was very shocking, forming a strange and harmonious painting. After swaying all his inspiration, Lin looked at the two paintings in his hand and felt that he had no regrets in his life. because he knew very well that these two paintings would be remembered forever by the world with this historic moment. However, after sorting out his emotions, Lin did not forget another important matter, otherwise some people would not be able to wait. Thinking of this, Lin looked at Herv and asked, "Lord Herv, do you want to send this message to Greenreal now?" Herv, who was calculating the surface area of the planet, had no time to pay attention and just nodded casually. "Since it has been confirmed, send it." At the same time, in Greenreal City, more than a dozen alchemists were guarding in front of the alchemy array for communication, anxiously waiting for the message from the other side. But now it was already 12:37, and there was still no news, which made Raphael and others have to start to doubt whether this operation failed. Could it be that Lin En's assumption was actually wrong, and this continent was not a sphere? "Look, there is movement." A sharp-eyed alchemist noticed the light of the array at the first time, and everyone immediately gathered together. Due to the distance of more than 700 kilometers, the magic stones required to transmit information were also a terrifying number. So Lin only transmitted the two most important data, shadow length and vertex angle. The shadow length is 10.51 meters, and the vertex angle is 6 degrees. Raphael shouted excitedly as he watched the data composed of magic power constantly jumping in the alchemy circle. With the help of the amplification magic, the news quickly spread throughout Greenreal City, and a strange scene appeared in the entire wizard city. Countless wizards who were looking forward to it took out parchment and quills at the same time and began to calculate, and even many well-educated civilians participated. If it was just the shadow length, you must be proficient in trigonometric functions to calculate the data, which is enough to stump most wizards. But once you know the data of the vertex angle, it becomes the most basic multiplication and division, and even some civilians can calculate it. The circumference of the planet is 43,200 kilometers, the diameter is about 17,510 kilometers, and the surface area is 594 million square kilometers. On the crowded streets of Greenreal City, Alex looked at the data he had just calculated and muttered to himself, "He is not a wizard, or because of his limited talent, he does not even have the opportunity to enter a magic school as a wizard apprentice, but he has a strong interest in mathematics." Before, Alex thought that mathematics could only be used in daily transactions, and at most he could become a tax collector. But the last issue of Magic Daily opened the door to a new world for him. The wizard named Lin En from the Sea of Mist actually planned to calculate the circumference of the planet under their feet, and he did not need any magic, just a few simple mathematical formulas. Alex did not believe it would be so easy, but when these values really appeared on paper, there was no doubt in his heart, and the shock that surged was difficult to calm down. It seemed that the world was under his pen. Chapter 155 The Great Idea of Traveling Around the World. I figured it out. I figured it out. The radius of the planet is 7,200 kilometers. Nonsense. It should be 6,875 kilometers. Because the calculated value is too large. Similar discussions soon rang out in every corner of Greenreal. After repeated arguments and disputes, the data on the circumference, diameter and radius of the planet soon appeared on paper. The surface area of the planet is a terrifying number that is beyond everyone's expectations, 594 million square kilometers. Many people did not realize until this moment that the planet under their feet is so vast. In Ollie's heart, there was an idea that the world is so big, I want to see it. According to the circumference data just calculated, driving the best alchemy ship in the wizard land, under the most ideal circumstances, it only takes 3 months to circle a circle. However, when he put forward this idea, it caused everyone to laugh. The vastness and danger of the sea are not something that people like Ali who have no sailing experience can imagine. Even the most experienced sailors could die on their way to sea fishing if they ran into a storm. Not to mention those ferocious sea beasts. What if we use an airship? Alex was not defeated by the ridicule of the crowd, but proposed a new idea. Since crossing the sea is dangerous, maybe we can start from the air. Hearing Alex's words, the people with mocking and joking expressions suddenly fell silent, because they suddenly felt that although Alex's proposal was crazy, It was undeniable that it was feasible. Flying around the entire planet is definitely an extremely magnificent feat that is enough to be recorded in the history of magic. Maybe we can fly in the opposite direction. Doesn't the Magic Daily say that the continent under our feet is rotating from west to east? Then as long as we start from the east and fly to the west, wouldn't it be possible to come back in one day? The tall and thin wizard said quite proudly, but he didn't notice that the people around him looked at him with a look of stupidity. If it was really that easy, they would have run from the east of Greenreal to the west of Greenreal the moment they jumped up. An alchemist pondered for a long time, shook his head, and said coldly, "I think it is impossible to accomplish such a grand feat even with an airship. If there is no way to determine the direction to go, it won't be long before you get lost in the sea, and you may even be attacked by a dragon, a feathered serpent, or a bird demon." However, this time, many people came out to support Alex's grand idea, such as proposing to set up a few magic crystal cannons on the airship to resist the invasion of flying monsters, or to determine the direction and position through the guidance of the stars. Everyone was discussing it, but Alex himself was discouraged, because he suddenly thought, how could a civilian like himself get an alchemical airship of his own? In the city square not far away, Raphael stared at the wizards who were arguing fiercely about the right and wrong of the data, and even fighting because of contradictory theories, and said with great emotion, "Greenreal, it's been a long time since it was so lively. Since Lin En came to this ancient wizard city, it seemed to have injected new vitality into the city. Every day, they refreshed their understanding of the world and even let some civilians participate in academic discussions." This was the first time he saw a scene where wizards and civilians discussed a certain magic theory together. The noise in Greenreal City lasted for a long time, until 2 days later, when the returning airship appeared over the city. The atmosphere reached its peak. Tens of thousands of people gathered in the streets and squares, waiting for the airship to land with great excitement. As the airship slowly lowered its altitude, everyone was looking forward to it, and some children even climbed onto the roof mischievously to see farther. Lydia, who was the first to get off the airship, waved her hands happily when she saw the dense crowds of people welcoming them in the city square. Darren and other halflings also shouted excitedly, "Lydia, I knew you could do it. Lydia, you are the pride of the halflings, our hero." Voices came one after another from all corners of the square. Although halflings were a minority in the entire wizard land, there were several thousand of them. Relying on their physical advantages, they squeezed to the front and shouted Lydia's name in unison. "A halfling who can't do magic? How did she get on the airship?" Several wizards from Greenreal who came from the town on the west side of the wizard land frowned when they saw Lydia getting off the airship. Measuring the circumference of the planet, such a sacred moment, why must we bring a halfling who is ignorant and can't learn magic? Hearing this, Darren and others immediately became unhappy and spoke out indignantly. "What do you know? Lydia is now Master Lin's apprentice. All the core parts of this airship were made by Lydia herself. No one knows how to fly an airship better than her." Several wizards were a little bit unbelievable. In the history of Wizard Land, no school would accept halflings as apprentices. After all, it is an indisputable fact that halflings have no magical talent. Some wizards of plastic science even contemptuously call halflings a group that is despised by magic. This also leads to the fact that the halfling group is not welcomed in some cities in Wizard Land, and that Lin, who came from the Sea of Mist, was willing to recruit halflings as apprentices and let them participate in the production process of such a delicate alchemical creation as an airship. This surprised several people, and even thought darkly whether that master had any special hobbies. "Can't wizards also join the Yaiata school and become Master Lin's apprentices?" Alex said excitedly, and those civilians who also longed to become wizards also looked at Darren eagerly. "Of course, Lydia is the best example," Darren said with great pride, and then thought about it and added hurriedly, "But it takes a very, very smart person." "Very, very smart?" Alex hesitated for a moment, thinking that he might not be able to meet this standard, but he still looked at Lin En, who had just walked down from the airship with a glimmer of hope. At the first sight of Lin En, Alex felt that he was young, too young, perhaps not even 20 years old, but such a wizard who was a few years younger than himself, proposed a great idea to measure the data of the planet, and put it into action, and achieved impressive results. At this moment, Lin En was talking happily with the legendary wizard Ralph. Even though he was far away and couldn't hear the conversation between the two, Alex could guess that they must be discussing more profound magic philosophy. However, all this was just his fantasy. In fact, Lin En was telling Ralph about the grievances between Newton and the apple. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156 Glass Mirror and Micro-Deformation Magnification. So the legendary wizard named Isaac was hit on the head by an apple, and thus discovered the existence of gravity? Trev asked curiously. Yes, it is said that Lord Isaac was only a former wizard at that time. After an academic discussion on the movement of stars, he suspected that there must be an invisible force pulling the planets in the galaxy to revolve around the sun. It was not until he walked under the apple tree and was hit by a falling apple that he suddenly realized it. Lin En explained with a headache, not knowing what went wrong. On the way back by airship, Trev suddenly became very interested in the legendary wizards made up by the secret society. As a last resort, Lin En had to tamper with some celebrities' stories to fool them. However, Trev was obviously not aware of this and was immersed in the celebrity stories told by Lin En. What surprised him the most was that when the legendary wizards of the secret society developed many magical theories, they were only apprentices, former wizards, or even ordinary people who could not do magic. However, they relied on the Olympiad of mathematics, amazing intuition, and extraordinary imagination to discover the truth contained in those sparse and ordinary phenomena. For example, Isaac discovered the phenomenon of gravity because of a falling apple, and Kepler judged that the planet under his feet was a sphere based on the phenomenon of the lunar eclipse. Maybe this is genius. Trev couldn't help thinking that it was only after he became a great wizard that he discovered the existence of gravity due to the improvement of magic power and computing power when releasing magic, which caused a certain disturbance in space. Compared with the experience of those legendary wizards, Trev was a little ashamed. But at the same time, Trev also noticed a very important point, that is, the Olympiad of mathematics. Whether it is the 3 laws of stars mentioned by Lin En, or the law of universal gravitation, or even the measurement of planetary data, they can be intuitively presented in the form of Olympiad of mathematics. Many complex explanations are simplified, and they can be calculated as long as there is a formula. Trev calls it Olympiad of mathematics thinking. This is undoubtedly what the wizard land lacks, and perhaps it is also the reason why the Secret Law Society can make rapid progress in the study of magic. Thinking of this, Trev begged Lin En to summarize some basic knowledge of mathematical Olympiad into a book. He was going to apply to the parliament to make mathematical Olympiad a mainstream subject for various schools to study. Lin En naturally agreed with pleasure. He had long wanted to unify all the messy operation symbols in the wizard land, so that he would not have to spend a lot of time to figure out what each symbol represents every time he flipped through the magic book. The most annoying thing is that sometimes each school has different operation symbols for the same formula. For example, there are several less representing pi, which made him very confused. Since we have calculated the various data of the planet under our feet, can you tell me what the gravitational constant is now? Trev asked curiously. The pendulum experiment and the measurement of planetary data that Lin En had done before were undoubtedly preparations for this most important thing. Lord of, I'm afraid you need to wait a few more days. To calculate the gravitational constant, we still lack a very important thing. Then we can all intuitively see the effects of gravity and the distortion of space. Lin En explained freely. Oh? Trev immediately became interested. Gravity is an invisible and intangible force. He can only compare it to water waves to understand the changes in space. However, Lin En said that there is a way for them to see the effect of gravity. How can he not be curious? Is there anything we can help with? Trev asked hurriedly. I'm looking for some raw materials for the experiment. Lin En roughly described the appearance and properties of quartz and feldspar. The method he used to measure the gravitational constant was naturally the famous Cavendish torsion balance. If you want to replicate this experiment, you need to use light and several mirrors to reflect light. After all, the influence of gravity is very weak. Only by using light projection to amplify the slight disturbance twice can the changes be perfectly presented. Quartz and feldspar are two raw materials for making glass. Of course, it is not impossible to melt the sand directly at high temperature, but in addition to silicon dioxide, the sand will inevitably contain many impurities, which will affect the quality of the finished product. In addition, fluxing agents such as limestone and soda ash are needed. These two things are easy to get. Limestone is everywhere near the port of Ida, and soda ash can be synthesized by yourself. The Parliament's actions were faster than Lin En imagined. On the second day after he returned to Green Real City, Ralph sent people to transport several tons of quartz sand and feldspar with dozens of camels, and piled them high in front of the temporary residence, attracting the attention of many people. Sir Lin En, if the quantity is not enough, I will ask someone to get another batch tomorrow, Coral said in a very respectful tone. As a disciple of Ralph, Coral did not dare to underestimate this young wizard who was famous in the wizard land, and he was not dissatisfied with the other party because he was appreciated by Ralph. After all, Teresa's fate was a warning. That's enough. This is definitely enough. Lin En looked at the quartz sand and feldspar piled up into two small hills, and his mouth twitched. With so many raw materials, he could open a glass factory. After rejecting the other party's kindness, Lin En asked Lydia, Darren and other halflings to take some of the raw materials and returned to the house. The process of making glass is not complicated. It only needs to be dissolved at high temperature. The melting point of quartz sand is 1750 degrees. But the melting point is reduced a lot by adding soda ash and limestone. It is no problem for Lin En to use magic to create such a high temperature. Under the curious eyes of Lydia and others, the decomposed granular quartz sand gradually melted under the effect of flame magic, turning into a red liquid shape that kept flowing in the palm of the hand, and then put it into the round mold that had been made long ago. After the glass was completely formed, Lin En pasted tin foil on one side, and finally poured mercury. Mercury is a liquid metal that can dissolve tin and make it stick tightly to the glass plate. When it is completely solidified, a smooth, flawless glass mirror that can clearly reflect a person's shadow appears in front of everyone. Chapter 157. Even if you rob money, it won't be this fast. Professor Lin, what is this? A mirror? Lydia asked in amazement, leaning on the experimental table with her feet on a chair, staring at the smooth and flawless round mirror in front of her. There are mirrors in the wizard land, but they are all polished copper mirrors. It is said that some wizards will cast magic on them, but Lydia is sure that even the best copper mirror in the wizard land is not as good as this one. Yes, I call it a glass mirror. Lin nodded with a smile. Darren and other halflings also gathered around, looking at the clear image reflected in the mirror in amazement. Perfect. It's so perfect, it's even clearer than the reflection of the lake. Darren couldn't help but exclaim. He had never seen such a beautiful mirror. It was like a work of art. After obtaining Lin's permission, the halflings carefully stretched out their hands, held the round mirror in their hands, and gently touched the transparent mirror surface, as if they would break the precious round mirror with a little force. Lin En was also somewhat amused when he saw Darren and the others' expressions, which were as if they had seen a rare treasure. He originally thought that since wizards had a preliminary understanding of the laws of the movement of stars, glass, a necessary technology for astronomical observation, should have been pointed out long ago. As a result, after asking Herv, he learned that those wizards of the prophecy school had developed various telescopic magics in order to observe the starry sky, and even upgraded the alchemical eyepieces several times. But they did not study this aspect. There was no way. Magic was so easy to use that Lin En began to get used to using magic to solve problems. For example, this time when making glass, normally a furnace was needed, but he solved it all with the flame magic. Lydia fiddled with it left and right, staring at her reflection in the mirror with joy. No girl could refuse such a smooth and flawless glass mirror that could clearly reflect her face. "Professor, is it made of this special sand?" Lydia reluctantly handed the round mirror to the next halfling, looked at the basket of raw materials on the table, and asked curiously, "How is it possible? This must be the effect of magic," Darren said with great confidence. "How could such a beautiful glass mirror be made simply with some sand and stone?" "So magic must have been added." Lydia ignored Darren and looked directly at Lin En, waiting for his answer. "Yes, the main component of glass is silicon dioxide, which is found in sand. The production process does not require any magic, just use high temperature to melt it and then shape it into the shape you want." Lin En nodded, confirming Lydia's guess, and then briefly explained the production process of the glass mirror. Since the glass mirror has been made, Lin En is naturally not satisfied with just using it as an experiment. This novel product will inevitably set off a new trend in the wizard land. As for the subsequent mass production, it is impossible for him to be responsible for it personally. There are not many people who are trustworthy now. These halflings have at least been tested. During the period of operation of the airship, Darren sent him enough magic gold coins every month, and there was no such thing as embezzlement. As for the leaked airship drawings, it was Derek who got Ralph's body from Sheriff Leia and used psychic magic to search his memory to get some information. He couldn't blame a dead person for not keeping the secret in his mind, right? Of course, Lin En also kept some slightly more complicated techniques, such as the production methods of mercury and tinfoil. He planned to teach them to several wizard apprentices separately and split the entire production process to avoid the leakage of the formula to the greatest extent. After Lin En explained the production method of the glass mirror, all the halflings were a little surprised. Except for the high-temperature furnace required to melt the quartz sand, there was almost no technical difficulty, and the cost was extremely low, probably only a few silver coins. But if it was used for sale, Darren believed that even if the price was 20 magic gold coins, someone would rush to buy it. A full 1,000 times the profit, even if it was robbing money. It would not be so fast. 2 days later, at noon, thousands of wizards were gathered in the hall of the magic seminar, discussing the next topic with great anticipation. They have all received the news that Lin En will be here today to reveal the last secret of the planet under their feet. "What do you think Mr. Lin En will use to weigh the weight of the planet under our feet this time?" Raphael looked at Auguste beside him and said thoughtfully. He thought about it for 2 days, and pulled out a lot of hair, but he still had no clue. It seemed like something that was impossible to do, probably using the division method, just like when measuring the circumference. Auguste's face was filled with a confident and easygoing smile. "Since we know the volume of the planet, we only need to select a few areas as samples, weigh them, find out how many cubic meters of soil weighing 1 ton is, take an average, and then according to the ratio of the volume, we can roughly estimate the weight of the planet under our feet. Of course, these are just some of my humble opinions. The geology of different regions is different, and there are special situations such as mines and oceans, which need to be discussed in categories," Auguste said very humbly, but still revealed his estimated value. "The weight I calculated is about 300 trillion tons. The error should not exceed 20%. Raphael and the others also sighed that August was worthy of being the star of the magic world. His brain was really useful. He could think of such a method. They all heard that after Lin En returned to Green Reel, he immediately asked someone to transport 2 piles of sand and stones. Now that he thought about it, he should be estimating their weight. Lower also looked at August with great admiration. He felt that his teacher had seen the truth. This was probably the only way. As they were talking, a burst of sneers came from the side. "Mr. Coral, do you have any different opinions, or have you found a better way to measure weight?" Lower looked at the wizard beside him with dissatisfaction. "Sorry, I don't know what the weight measurement method is." Coral shook his head. He only knew that Lin En needed those sand and stones not for weight measurement, but to make some kind of experimental equipment. Then, without waiting for everyone to question, Coral pointed to the curtains that were suddenly drawn around him and said with a smile, "But I guess it has something to do with darkness." Chapter 158 Lin En's outrageous statement. Gravity does not exist. Dark. Raphael and the others paused for a moment, and then they felt that all the light in the hall disappeared, leaving only a little light from the skylight on the roof, shining on the high platform. Everyone's eyes naturally focused on it, and Lin En's figure soon appeared in front of everyone, with a faint smile on his face. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to take the time to attend today's magic seminar. The seminar hall, which was originally a bit noisy, immediately became as noisy as a festival celebration, with all kinds of discussions and someone shouting loudly, "Mr. Lin, I still have a few points that I don't understand about the method you proposed to calculate the angle between the Earth's center and the center of the Earth. What do cubic, square and square root mean? What is the radius and volume of the planet under our feet? Is it 860 billion cubic kilometers or 1.23 trillion cubic kilometers? Mr. Lin, when you said to weigh the planet, did you use some special magic, or is it the same division method as measuring the circumference?" Various questions came one after another. In addition to those wizards who were curious about the weighing method, there were also some wizards who wanted to confirm whether the values they calculated were correct. Although counting is not difficult for wizards with good brains, the degree of mastery of each wizard is different. In addition, the various data of a planet are really too large. If there's a slight mistake in the calculation process, the final result will be very different. So after 2 days of fermentation, thousands of wizards calculated several different answers. In order to argue about right and wrong, they almost fought on the spot. Silence. Silence. It's not time for questions yet. A great wizard who was hosting the seminar slammed the table angrily, which temporarily stopped the increasingly loud discussions. Lin En spoke at this time. "I'll answer your questions one by one. First of all, the radius of the planet under our feet is about 6,875 kilometers, and the volume is 1,361.4 billion cubic kilometers. We can use the circumference formula to reverse the radius. The radius is equal to the circumference divided by twice the pi. And the volume can be directly calculated by substituting the radius into the formula." Lin En patiently explained the radius, volume, and the corresponding Olympiad formulas and derivation process. After all, these are the data that must be used in the subsequent experiments. Those wizards who calculated the data accurately were naturally satisfied, while those who calculated incorrectly were embarrassed, and some wizards who were not convinced checked the calculations on the spot. However, there were also many wizards like Roll who had average math skills and secretly memorized these data. You should know that recently, planets and star orbits are the hottest topics in Green Reel. Any gathering between wizards will inevitably talk about it. It has become a trend. As for the weight of the planet under our feet and the method of measuring it, I think there is an important problem to be solved before the real decryption. Lin En's face straightened, looking at the wizards in the seminar hall, and suddenly asked, "What do you think is the nature of gravity, or what factors determine the weight of an object when it is weighed?" Lin En's question instantly stumped the wizards on the field. It looks simple but very tricky, even a little inexplicable, just like asking them to explain why water is called water instead of soil. The weight of an object is of course measured with a balance scale and weights. The wizards of the Alchemy Association have even made a magic scale that can weigh an object very accurately. What you want to say is that the gravity we feel is the gravity of the planet itself, right? So, it is because of the influence of gravity that we can weigh an object. After a long pause, a great wizard in front of the high platform responded, "Yes, but no." Lin En nodded, then shook his head. Gravity is a component of universal gravitation. It is not always a constant value. Even on the same planet, the gravity felt in different places will be different. Generally speaking, the closer you are to the planet, the greater the influence of universal gravitation, and the farther you are, the smaller the influence of gravity. Once you enter the boundless starry sky, the concept of weight no longer exists. Lin En explained. In other words, in a place without gravity, everything is weightless. The witch sitting in the front row couldn't help but stand up. This is incredible. Although the concept of gravity has been proposed long ago, and after the baptism of the free fall experiment, the relationship between gravity and gravity is almost equal, but the weight of an object will change with the strength of gravity, or even disappear. which is far beyond everyone's imagination. This is simply challenging their three views. After a while, another wizard stood up and refuted. Sir Lin En, please forgive me for not being able to agree with this concept. Doesn't it mean that no matter whether it is soil or gold, silver, copper or iron, once they leave the influence of gravity, they will have no difference and become lighter than feathers? Of course they are different, because the masses are different, and the weight we feel is actually the product of the mass of the object and the acceleration of gravity. Lin En said freely. Mass? What is that? The witch who just stood up had a puzzled look on her face. You can understand it as the total amount of elements contained in an object. Lin En said as concisely as possible. It is the most basic property inherent in matter itself, and it will not change with the temperature, pressure, or speed of the outside world. Whether it is placed on a planet or in the universe, this value is the same. The discussion in the hall became heated again. The discussion was about the new concept proposed by Lin En, using mass instead of weight. Everything in the world is made up of elements, which is common sense in the land of wizards, so Lin En's words are not too difficult to understand. However, the other party's next words shocked everyone present. In addition, in my opinion, gravity may not exist. Lin En didn't care whether these wizards could accept it or not, and he started to make a fuss as soon as he opened his mouth. The scene of the seminar suddenly exploded, and thousands of wizards stood up and looked at Lin En in disbelief. He actually denied the existence of gravity. How dare he! Exclamation mark. Chapter 159 Matter tells space-time how to curve, and space-time tells matter how to move. Lin En's words instantly set off the whole audience, and even Raphael and others who were responsible for maintaining order at the seminar could not sit still. If Lin En's remarks in the past were digging the foundation of the magic world, then now he was trying to kick down the entire magic building with 1 foot. Mr. Lin En, this is not the time to joke. Raphael's expression was very serious. He looked at Lin En and said solemnly, don't the free fall law and the theory of star orbits that you proposed before prove the influence of gravity? Raphael really didn't understand why the other party suddenly said such a violent statement. Isn't this slapping himself in the face? There are no fewer people who have the same idea as Raphael. Some people even think that Lin En is crazy, or deliberately saying some strange things to attract their attention. Amidst the doubts, Lin En spoke again. In my opinion, the so-called gravity is essentially a phenomenon of space-time curvature. The current mainstream theory in the wizarding land is that gravity affects and distorts space, but Lin En reversed the cause and effect. It is because of the change in space that the gravity phenomenon is caused. So someone immediately stood up and asked, if it's not the effect of gravity, then what kind of force caused the space to deform? Of course it's mass. Lin En said decisively. The reason why we feel the influence of gravity or gravitation is because the huge mass of the planet under our feet distorts time and space, forcing us to fall towards the center of the earth. And a few great wizards who specialize in force field magic showed a thoughtful look on their faces. And those former wizards felt that their brain power was not enough. Every word of Lin En was constantly challenging the limits of their imagination and thinking ability. Gravity does not actually exist, or it is just a phenomenon. In fact, it is space that is pulling them in a certain direction. This invisible and intangible change in space makes it difficult for many wizards to understand. Especially it is impossible to imagine how the distortion of space can do this. Lin En did not explain it at length, but moved aside. On the high platform behind him was a round piece of cloth made of feathered serpent skin, which has very good elasticity. It was placed on an iron frame and was tightly collapsed. Everyone present looked over curiously, while Lin En picked up a 10-kilogram ball and placed it in the center of the circular cloth. The next moment, the originally straight circular cloth instantly sank down, forming a curved surface with the ball as the center. The degree of curvature of the surface became weaker as it went outward. As for the so-called gravity, it's like this. Lin En took out a 1-kilogram ball from his pocket, casually pressed it on a corner of the curved surface, and then let go. Everyone in the seminar stared with their eyes wide open, and the wizards in the back row stood up. Some even used the far-sighted magic directly to see more clearly, without Lin En applying any extra force. The ball automatically rolled down to the center along the curved surface. So that's it, gravity. This is gravity. A great wizard was so excited that he could hardly contain himself. He imagined a three-dimensional cloth, and then all four sides collapsed towards the center, attracting objects. Without waiting for everyone to recover, Lin En picked up another small ball again, changed the angle and exerted some strength, giving it an initial speed. The small ball changed its way of movement, no longer rolling straight down, but rotating along the curved surface around the large ball in the center. Star track. This is the star track, another person shouted excitedly. All the wizard's eyes were focused on this piece of white round cloth with a diameter of only 1 meter. They vaguely felt that they were not staring at a few balls, but the great picture of the stars and the universe. Lin En very intuitively used a piece of elastic leather to show the distortion and collapse of three-dimensional space in the form of a two-dimensional surface. However, the distortion of time cannot be presented in this intuitive way. Fortunately, this is enough. This small experiment is just to help these wizards better understand the phenomenon of attraction caused by the curvature of space. Lin En looked at the wizards in the seminar who were excited, absent-minded, excited, or fanatical, and summarized again. So I think gravity is a geometric effect caused by the curvature of space-time. Matter tells space-time how to bend, and space-time tells matter how to move. Matter tells space-time how to bend, and space-time tells matter how to move. The wizards in the hall who have some knowledge of force field magic are constantly chewing on these words. Exquisite, really exquisite. This is the secret of space-time magic. Mr. Lin, just based on your speech today, you are enough to be nominated for a Corona Medal. A great wizard who was responsible for maintaining order in the venue looked at Lin's slightly immature face and sighed. At the last seminar, the legendary wizard who threatened to award Lin with a Corona Medal. He was still a little indignant. The other party did propose a set of star pictures that went against the mainstream theory, but it was not to the extent of issuing the Corona Medal. A silver moon medal was enough. But now it seems that although Lin is only a formal wizard, his understanding of gravity and space is far beyond what he can compare with. Every word spoken today can serve as the foundation of space magic. Some fanatics even recorded Lin En's description of matter and time and space verbatim. Even if they didn't understand, they could always use it when bragging to others in the future. I have another question. Why don't the planets under our feet rush towards the sun under the action of gravity, just like that small ball? Raphael asked in confusion. The second small ball that Lin En put down, although it kept rotating around the curved surface when it fell, the amplitude was getting smaller and smaller, and it would eventually be sucked into the side of the big ball. That's because there is no air resistance in a vacuum. The speed of the stars will not slow down, forming a balance with gravity. And of course it will not fall into the sun. Lin En explained. Raphael thought about it, and then he noticed that the small ball before was gradually moving closer to the center because its speed was gradually slowing down, and the orbit became shorter and shorter, and finally fell into the center of the curved surface. It turned out to be like this. Raphael suddenly realized that many of his previous doubts about the orbit of the stars were instantly solved. Chapter 160 Calculating the Gravitational Constant Using Mirror Reflection. After Raphael sat down contentedly, another great wizard who was proficient in force field magic asked curiously, Mr. Lin, since you said that it is the mass that causes the distortion of space that causes the phenomenon of gravity, then does it only happen with massive stars? I think Lord R's theory of gravity explains this very clearly. This phenomenon exists widely in everything. Lin replied calmly. Does a grain of sand or a stone also have this effect? Lydia raised her hand high and asked a question that most people present were puzzled about. Of course. Lin nodded and explained. It's like putting an object into water. Even a grain of sand will inevitably push the water away. Then why have we never felt this so-called attraction brought by the distortion of space? Lord couldn't help but stand up. This was also the most confusing question for him. If gravity exists in any object, then it should exist in them as well. Why don't the sand and stones on the ground get sucked in when they walk on the road? That's because compared to our mass, the impact on space and time is too small. Even in front of a towering mountain, its disturbance to space and time can be almost ignored. I'm afraid it's not as attractive to you as a gorgeous lady who happens to pass by, Lin En said jokingly. Among the four fundamental forces, although the scope of gravity is theoretically infinite, it is the weakest force. This wonderful metaphor made Luo a little amused, but he still asked another important question. Since the influence of gravity is extremely weak, how can we be sure that it exists in everything? Only great wizards can barely feel the subtle changes in the curvature of space. For formal wizards, if they want to understand space and time, they can only rely on imagination. Mr. Luo, in fact, this is exactly the topic we need to discuss today. Lin En clapped his hands while speaking, and Johnny, Alok and others immediately stepped forward and pushed up a very sophisticated experimental device. It looked like a beam balance for weighing heavy objects, but a 2-meter-long steel wire was tied to the top, making it suspended in the air. A small ball weighing 1 kilogram was placed at each end of the swing arm. Was it preparing for weighing? The wizards at the venue were confused, but they quickly rejected this guess because Lin En asked Johnny and others to move 2 50-kilogram iron balls next to the small ball. Lin En then explained, "As I said before, gravity exists in any object. They will always attract each other. Although it is very weak, it is not non-existent. It just takes some special means to see this disturbance. I think you should not have forgotten the previous pendulum experiment. You only need to use a thin wire rope to magnify the slight disturbance. This torsion balance device also uses a similar method. I call it the method of small deformation amplification. According to the law of universal gravitation, the big ball will exert gravity on the small ball, and the entire T-shaped torsion balance will rotate an angle in the direction of the big ball. The greater the gravity, the greater the angle of rotation. Then conversely, we only need to measure the angle of rotation of the wire rope to calculate the magnitude of the force on both ends of the swing arm." After Lin's explanation, the wizards were very interested in this small and exquisite device and stared at it. "Did you see anything, Pierce?" Alok stared at the small ball hanging on the swing arm, and could not see any disturbance for a long time. He looked at his companion and asked in a low voice, "Of course, just like what the professor said. The small ball is constantly being pulled closer under the gravitational force of the big ball." Pierce nodded pretentiously, and also kept an eye on the torsion balance on the platform. But like Alok, his eyes were sore and he could not see any changes. But since the professor said this method is useful, it must be right. The wizards in the hall were also looking at the balls, except for Huv, Raphael and a few others who could see the hanging steel wires turning slightly. Everyone else was confused. A wizard couldn't help but stand up and asked directly, "Mr. Lin, has your experiment started?" Lin nodded and said casually, "Just wait another minute and you will be able to see it clearly." Seeing Lin's affirmation, some impatient wizards on the scene had no choice but to continue waiting. The pointer of the magic clock soon passed 12 o'clock. The sun was already hanging high above the head, and the sunlight was shining directly down. At the same time, Lin picked up an unusually small glass mirror and reflected the sunlight directly from the skylight onto the thin steel wire. Until then, many wizards noticed that there was also a strange round mirror hanging at the middle of the steel wire. After the sunlight hit the center of the round mirror, it was reflected again onto the scale on the opposite side. "I saw it. It's moving. The light spot is moving," Lydia shouted loudly. In fact, Lydia didn't need to remind her. This time everyone saw it very clearly. The light spot reflected on the scale was slowly moving to the right, slowly turning from 0 to 1. Could this be the effect of the Coriolis force? A witch suddenly interrupted. Luo and others also thought of this immediately. Yes, could it be that the Coriolis force is affecting the slow movement of the ball, just like the pendulum before? Lin En didn't reply, and directly moved the big ball that was originally placed on the right side of the ball to the left. After a while, the light spot changed direction and began to shift to the left, slowly returning from 1 scale to 0. Seeing this incomparably magical scene, everyone had no doubts in their hearts, and the only thing left was shock. Even the most demanding and tricky people cannot deny the existence of gravity. After all, the light spot does not move randomly, but changes with the position of the big ball. So there is no doubt that this is definitely the effect of gravity. It was the attraction generated by the space distortion phenomenon. Compared to the other wizards who were amazed at the theory of gravity, Trev was more concerned about the ingenuity of the experiment itself. The gravitational force of a 50-kilogram iron ball was almost negligible, but Lin En used his long swinging arms to amplify this tiny effect once, and then amplified it again through light, so that the subtle space distortion that was not noticeable on weekdays was presented so intuitively in front of them. Trev couldn't help but express the same feeling as Raphael. How could the other party's brain be so good that he could come up with such a wonderful idea? Chapter 161 Mathematical Olympiad is the foundation of everything. In order to ensure that the calculated gravitational constant is accurate enough, Lin En once again asked the great wizards to create a vacuum field, and asked Johnny and others to retreat from the high platform to minimize the interference. After several experiments, the final value of the gravitational constant was soon presented to everyone. 6.67 times 10 carat minus 11 newtons middle square meters /kg2. This is basically the same as the universe in the previous life. It seems that in addition to possessing the special energy of magic, the basic parameters of the two universes are roughly the same. However, the N representing the symbol of gravity may need to be replaced by L representing itself. And another important data, gravitational acceleration, has been calculated by Lin En a long time ago. It is about 10 meters per second carat 2, slightly higher than the value of 9.8 on the Earth. With these two values, it becomes extremely easy to calculate the weight of the planet under your feet. You only need to use the golden substitution formula gm equals gr2 derived from the universal gravitational formula. That is, the gravitational acceleration multiplied by the square of the radius and then divided by the gravitational constant. After Lin En roughly described the derivation process of the formula, Trev and others immediately took out paper and pen to calculate the square of the huge planet value, divided by the extremely small gravitational constant, makes people's scalps numb. I can't calculate it. I can't calculate it. It's too difficult. Lwoer looked at the values piled up on the whole page of parchment and felt dizzy. Raphael beside him desperately grabbed his few hairs, and fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead, just to calculate the final result. Even if there are thousands of obstacles, few people choose to give up. After all, the final mystery of the planet under their feet is right in front of them. They have arrived at the door of truth and can kick it open with just one kick. The only problem is that this door is too hard and it is easy to break a bone. After a full hour and a half, a wizard stood up excitedly, almost crazy, and shouted loudly, "I figured it out, it's 67 trillion tons." After saying that, he stared at Lin En, hoping to get his approval. However, Lin En just shook his head. Trev, who had just calculated the data, was much more straightforward and directly rejected it. Wrong. It's ridiculously wrong. Wrong. How could it be wrong? The excited look on the wizard's face froze immediately. He grabbed several parchment rolls in front of him and carefully reviewed them several times before he found that he had written a wrong number when writing the value of the planet's radius. The unit used was still kilometers. That is to say, he needed to add n zeros and recalculate. His 1.5 hours of calculations were all in vain. Realizing this, the wizard trembled and spit out a mouthful of blood, and fainted on the spot. Alok looked at him with pity, and then stopped writing. Even formal wizards had such a hard time calculating, so apprentices like them were better off waiting for the answer. Although it is difficult to calculate huge numbers, as time goes by, more and more people have calculated the results. It is a number that cannot be accurately described by any existing units. Only by using the Olympiad formula can it be intuitively displayed. 7.08 times 10 carat 24 kilograms. No wonder, in the secret society, Olympiad is the basis of everything. Trev finally understood. Values like gravity and stars, which are either extremely huge or as small as dust, can only be clearly calculated through Olympiad derivation. Thinking of this, Trev directly announced the result. After getting Lin En's confirmation, he was secretly relieved. Such a huge number, even after repeated confirmation, Can't help but worry about mistakes. Koror and others looked at Ojust with a strange look. Do they remember how much the magic star estimated the weight of the planet? It seems to be 30 trillion tons. Is this a bit too much? It seems that the so-called magic star is nothing more than that. Compared with Lin En's universal gravitational substitution formula that directly points to the essence of weight, the method of dividing and calculating the weight of soil is not worth mentioning at all. Facing the mocking eyes of Koror and others, August remained calm. The 20% deviation he mentioned actually refers to the number of zeros. The discussion about the gravitational constant and the weight of the planet continued until the evening. Some fanatical wizards of the prophecy school even estimated the mass of other planets in the star system based on the law of universal gravitation, intending to reconstruct a picture of the movement of stars. The witches in the venue were more interested in the round mirror that Lin En took out during the experiment. After learning that this smooth and flawless glass mirror could be mass-produced and sold for only 20 magic gold coins, they were overjoyed. It was not until the end of the seminar that Lin En got rid of the situation of being chased and asked. In order to make these wizards understand certain terms, he was racking his brains. After all, there were too many things to explain: the culture, vocabulary, scientific level, and even the brain circuits of the two worlds are different. For example, to use the universal gravitation formula to calculate the weight of a planet, you have to first tell these wizards that weight is the intrinsic mass multiplied by acceleration, and then you have to explain what mass is. Fortunately, after all this effort, the effect far exceeded his expectations. The Secret Law Society, Mathematical Olympiad, and the Aida School are so famous in the wizard land that some lone wizards have begun to test his mouth and ask if they can join the Aida School. Regarding your nomination for the Corona Medal, it has been approved by the Parliament. The awarding ceremony will be held in 2 days. You'd better take time to prepare, Prv said with a smile. Are there any rules or things to pay attention to? Lin En asked. He thought he just had to go up and receive the award. That's not the case, but this is the first time that the highest award of magic academics has been awarded to an official wizard. You have to say a few more words to convince the public, Prv said jokingly, then straightened his face and continued. I think your theory of universal gravitation still has some omissions. Lin En's expression also became serious, but soon he heard Prv solemnly say, it's not just mass that can affect time and space, but also magic. Lin En was immediately at a loss for words. He thought the other party was going to say something new. Of course he knew this. After all, matter is energy, and energy is matter. It's just that now is not the time to come up with a mass-energy equation. As for the law of universal gravitation, even if I am not here, Prv will be able to deduce it in a few years. All he needs is an inspiration. P.S. I have indeed written a lot about scientific research these days. I originally just wanted to write about the derivation of universal gravitation, but there are too many things to explain and too many preliminary experiments. One by one, I have been exhausted from calculating the data. Fortunately, I have finished writing it. Please forgive me. Chapter 162. Use the law of universal gravitation to reconstruct force field magic. On the way back to the school lounge, Prv was discussing with Lin about the influence of magic on the curvature of space. Lin had been in the field of magic for a long time and had listened to Prv's detailed explanation. Naturally, he answered fluently and even brought out the best magic structure proposed by the other party to discuss again, openly asking about the things he didn't understand. While Prv answered one by one, he couldn't help but sigh. Even a three-ring wizard like Lin had such a deep understanding of the connection between magic and time and space. How could those legendary wizards of the Secret Magic Society know nothing about the best magic structure? Sure enough, he was overthinking. Maybe it was just that the question he asked was too low-end, and the other party was too lazy to answer, so he acted so perfunctory. Prv thought so, and then his expression paused, as if he had heard something, and a helpless expression appeared on his face, but he still spoke. I have a friend who is very interested in the glass mirror that can flash, and can't wait to have one. Do you have any stock? Is this friend talking about you? Lin En looked at her with a strange look. He thought that this legendary wizard who usually dressed very casually, even a little unkempt, would not be interested in glass mirrors. Of course, it could also be due to academic research considerations, or it could be given to relatives and children. Lin En did not hesitate and sent out the large round mirror that he had removed from the torsion balance device. "It's 20 gold coins, right? I'll ask Coral to deliver it tomorrow." Prov took the round mirror, said something casually, and then handed it to his side. Under Lin En's gaze, the round mirror disappeared quietly. Could it be that Prov also has something like a storage prop? But how come he has never heard of this thing? Lin En thought unexpectedly, but he did not ask presumptuously. After saying goodbye to Prov, he went straight back to the lounge of the school. He couldn't wait to verify his guess. After perfecting the law of universal gravitation with the help of the Parliament's mobilization ability, Lin En had a vague feeling that he did not need more computing power to perform some force field magic. This was not a groundless guess, because the wizard's spellcasting can be likened to running a certain program or solving a very complex equation. In the case of unknowns, we can only find the answer by substituting different values over and over again and using the elimination method. Now it is equivalent to turning two of the unknowns into certain values. The first is the gravitational constant of this universe, and the second is the space-time curvature of the Earth's surface. In this way, the computing power required to release force field magic has dropped by more than several times. This is why Prov and others said that the law of universal gravitation will become the foundation of space magic. So in the 2 days waiting for the award ceremony, Lin En closed the door and refused to see guests, concentrating on studying the spell model of force field magic. All other matters were thrown to Philip and others, and they were asked to purchase a suitable property in Green Real as the residents of the IITA school in the future. After all, it's not good to stay in the rest room of the magic seminar every time I come. Although it's spacious, it's not convenient because there are too many people. In the past 6 months since I arrived in the wizard's land, I have accumulated nearly 5,000 magic gold coins from the income from the airship and the manor in Lodic, which is enough to buy a good manor anywhere outside the prosperous area of Green Real. Magic missiles. In the evening of the second day, in the training ground, the girl shouted softly, and dozens of flashing magic missiles appeared in the void. Alok and Pierce were not to be outdone. They used the strongest magic they had mastered. Several fireballs and ice blades intertwined, aiming directly at Lin En, who was not far in front of them. However, the latter did not make any move. The flames and ice blades were separated by some mysterious force before they touched his body, and passed by him directly and hit the wall behind him. At first glance, it looked like several apprentices deliberately avoided Lin and acted as archers. However, Alok and Pierce knew that at a distance of only 10 meters, facing a non-moving target, they would definitely not miss. Lin did not relax his vigilance just because he easily defended against the attacks of several people. He was even more keenly aware that the magic missile released by Johnny was flying slower than expected, and it exploded directly after touching the deflection force field. There seemed to be nothing inside, but Lin could sense that the hydrogen content in the air around him was rapidly increasing. At the same time, Johnny stretched out his left hand and crossed his right hand on his left wrist. That was the starting posture of the touch of flame. The weak flame expanded rapidly in a second, and the hot fire flow came in an instant and ignited the hydrogen around Lin. Then a violent explosion sounded in the practice room, and thick smoke mixed with extremely burning flames rushed to the surroundings. Alok and Pierce showed a look of horror on their faces. This almost reached the destructive power of the third ring magic. It was the first time they knew that Johnny was so powerful. Could it be that Professor Lin En was seriously injured? Alok stared at the smoke and said uncertainly after seeing no movement for a long time, "How is it possible?" Johnny rolled his eyes at Alok, panting lightly, and did not pursue him. Such precise magic coordination consumes a lot of computing power. Even for Johnny, who has become a formal wizard, it is not an easy task. In the billowing smoke, Lin En's full-bodied voice came out. "Hydrogen explosion? Interesting. Johnny, you have learned elements and math well, but you have a poor grasp of the ratio of hydrogen to oxygen. The correct ratio should be 2 to 1. After the smoke and dust dissipated, Alok and others found that Lin En was still standing there unscathed, and even the corner of his clothes had not been lifted at all, which made Alok's scalp numb. Even an attack that was almost 3-ring magic could not make Lin En move at all. How can he fight? Although it was just an exercise, Alok and Pierce had already felt a sense of concession in their hearts, but Johnny was still full of fighting spirit. She had always wanted to measure the gap between herself and the professor. Now it's my turn. Are you ready? Lin En said with a smile. Alok and Pierce swallowed hard, and Johnny was also facing a formidable enemy. Under the gaze of the three people, Lin En stretched out his hand, and his index and middle fingers trembled slightly, as if he was plucking the strings of a guitar. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163, Resonance Magic and Space Vibration Waves. Seeing Lin's strange movements, Alok took a step back in fear, but soon found that there was no fire or frost coming out, and he was not attacked at all. What is the professor doing? Pierce was also confused. He couldn't be threatening them, right? This should be some kind of new magic, Johnny guessed, then looked at the two and spoke very quickly. Our only chance is to use offense as defense. This time I will be the main attacker, and you will assist. The two nodded without any other ideas. When they were about to cast the spell again, their bodies suddenly paused. Alok's face became extremely ugly, and he fell to the ground without warning. Pierce beside him behaved the same as Alok. His right hand tightly grasped his chest, and the veins on his forehead bulged, as if he was in great pain. Johnny was in a slightly better condition. She barely supported her body and didn't fall to the ground. She felt as if her heart was being pinched by someone. It beat in sync with the frequency of Lin's trembling fingers, sometimes as fast as thunder, sometimes as slow as sand. This strange and uncomfortable feeling instantly deprived the girl of the ability to resist. The brain also became drowsy due to the problem of blood supply. After about 2 or 3 seconds, this feeling gradually subsided, but the next moment the lungs and liver were attacked in the same way. I surrender, I admit defeat. Alok, who fell to the ground, kept twitching, shouting loudly, with a look of fear on his face. Seeing that the three had reached their limits, in order to avoid any side effects, Lin stopped releasing the new magic. Johnny, Alok and Pierce took several minutes to recover. Looking at Lin, they were full of fear. Just now, they almost thought their hearts were about to explode, but they had no idea where the attack came from. Professor, what kind of magic did you just release? Some kind of curse? Alok asked in shock. This strange magic even reminded him of the curse witchcraft widely spread in the wizard land. Of course not. Lin En shook his head with a smile, keeping it a secret without explaining. In fact, the principle of this magic is to use the resonance phenomenon. In scientific terms, it is the tendency of a physical system to absorb more energy from the surrounding environment at its natural vibration frequency. According to the terminology used by wizards, everything in the world is made up of elements, and they all have some inherent frequency. When the frequencies of two objects tend to be consistent, they will affect each other. For example, the average resonance frequency of the human body is 7.5 Hz, and each part has its own resonance frequency. The internal organs are 4 to 6 Hz, and the head is 8 to 12 Hz. Lin En's method is to create a miniature magic wave to make the vibration as close to the frequency of the heart as possible, thereby triggering a resonance phenomenon, causing the amplitude frequency of the heart to suddenly increase, causing damage from the inside. This kind of magic is not only difficult to detect, but also the attack is directly applied to the molecular and atomic levels. Unless you are prepared in advance, it is difficult to resist. However, in the experiment just now, Lin En also realized that a former wizard like Johnny is much more resistant to resonance magic than the two apprentices, Alok and Pierce. Although he intentionally reduced the power of the magic to avoid casualties, it can also be seen that it is not an easy task to use the resonance principle to directly kill those powerful wizards. It is good enough to have a slight impact at some important moments. This is a magic that wins by surprise, and it is also the reason why Lin En chose to keep the principle of magic secret. so that no one can develop corresponding protective magic. Johnny and others are extremely curious about this strange witchcraft that is like a curse, but seeing that the professor has no intention of revealing anything, they can only resist the curiosity that keeps surging and ask, "What about the magic that defended against fire and frost before?" "That's called a deflection field." Lin En did not hide it this time. "Deflection field? Isn't that fourth ring magic, Professor Lin? Have you broken through the realm of the great wizard?" Philip, who had been watching, said in surprise and excitement. Being able to use force field magic freely is one of the signs of a great wizard. Johnny, Elrock and Pierce also looked at Lin in surprise. No wonder such a powerful explosion just now couldn't do anything. It turned out to be fourth ring magic. This deflection field is just like a tortoiseshell, which makes people helpless. "No, it's not." Lin shook his head, denying the speculation of Philip and others, and then said with a smile, "It's just a trick. I named it secondary deflection field, which should belong to the upper three-ring magic." After calculating the gravitational constant, although it can effectively reduce the difficulty of casting force field magic, deflection field was originally cast by great wizards. Due to the gap in magic power and computing power, the protective effect is naturally not as good as the original version, so it can only be ranked as secondary. And force field magic is not invincible. Matter and energy can affect time and space, so it is possible to be broken by those powerful spells. The second is the problem of magic consumption. Even if the use requirements are reduced, the consumption of magic power is extremely terrifying. When the magic power is at its most abundant, it can only last for a short 15 seconds. The strange resonance magic that Lin En just released is a byproduct of his research on force field magic. Before, when fighting with Helrim in the Screaming Tower, the opponent had released a ripple magic with a very wide range. In order to avoid this magic, Lin En was almost pierced into a hedgehog by the flying iron thorns. He was deeply impressed by this. These days, he has been thinking about how to combine this ripple magic with force field magic. Through an extremely strong magic wave, the curvature of space changes, making time and space vibrate like water waves, thereby breaking through the enemy's defense and killing the enemy from the spatial level. Lin En named this expected magic, space vibration wave. However, from the principle of magic, it can be seen that it is at least a fourth ring or even a fifth ring magic. Lin En's several attempts have ended in failure. With his current computing power and magic reserves, it is definitely not enough. Unless he can use the computing power of others to temporarily break through his own limit like he did before, maybe he can reach the minimum standard for releasing this magic. Chapter 164 How much do you know about the Holy See, our enemy? Lin En failed to be promoted to the Great Wizard, which made Philip somewhat regretful, but he soon adjusted himself. After all, with Lin En's talent, it was only a matter of time to complete the promotion. Moreover, in recent days, with the spread of the law of universal gravitation, the Yayata school has been in the limelight. In the past 2 days, he has received hundreds of invitations to banquets and academic seminars, including some top schools. It's a pity that Lin En never goes out of the house, and postponed all of them on the grounds of focusing on new magic. "Do you know how people outside call you now?" Philip asked jokingly. Lin En shook his head. He didn't go out at all in the past 2 days, let alone care about this. "Green Ariel's twins," Philip said in amazement. The so-called twins, of course, refer to August, the most talented wizard in the history of the wizard land. He came into contact with magic at the age of 12, became a formal wizard at the age of 16, and was promoted to a great wizard at the age of 24. The speed was miraculous, and it was precisely because of this that he was given the title of Magic Star. This also means that in most people's minds, Lin En has been raised to the level of being equal to August. Philip looked around and saw that there were no outsiders here, so he lowered his voice and continued. "There are even many people who think that compared to Master August, you are the most glorious Magic Star." Johnny, Alok, and Pierce all looked at the professor with admiration. Lin En frowned. Such flattery is not good. I don't know if someone is deliberately indulging the spread of such news. As they were chatting, there was a knock on the door. "Professor, someone is looking for you outside." The door of the training ground was pushed open a crack, and Lydia's head came in from the outside of the door and said coquettishly, "It's Master August." The few people present were stunned for a moment. They had just talked about this great wizard, but they didn't expect that the other party would come to the door. "It's not like he's here to cause trouble, right?" Lin and Philip looked at each other, but they didn't mean to drive him away, so they asked Lydia to take the magic star to the reception room. 3 minutes later, Lin, who had changed his clothes, arrived at the reception room with Philip, Johnny, and Alok. "Welcome to my humble abode, Master August." Lin walked up and greeted him with a smile. "I just heard from Lydia that you have something important to discuss with me." "Yes." August nodded, and a smile appeared on his face, as if the rumors in recent times had not affected him at all. August's easygoing attitude made Philip secretly relieved. Although Lin is now famous and has been appreciated by the legendary wizard Harif, he is not afraid of him. But August is a magic star after all, and has a good influence in the wizard land. If possible, it is better not to conflict with him. "I heard from Luo that Sir Lin En crossed the sea from the Sekis Empire to the port of Yaita 3 months ago." August straightened his face and asked again, "I wonder what you think of the development of the wizard land during this period of time?" "In general, the academic atmosphere here is very good, and in all aspects, it is much better than the Sekis Empire." Lin En pondered for a while, searching the memory of his original body, and said with certainty, "If compared with the Earth in his previous life, the wizard land is undoubtedly still in a wild area, but if compared with the Sekis Empire, whose science, culture, and living standards are still at the end of the Middle Ages, it is much more advanced." "Is the Sea of Mist really as dilapidated as rumored?" Luo asked curiously. "That's not the case. At least the nobles and clergy live in castles in luxurious manners." Lin En explained with a little mockery that the convenience brought by divine arts is not worse than magic, but this is a privilege that only a very few people can enjoy. "By the way, Master August, why are you asking this all of a sudden?" Lin En asked in confusion. "It seems that you don't know the wind direction in the wizard land recently." August shook his head and explained. "Because of the theories proposed by Lin En at the seminar and the action of measuring the circumference of the planet, many conservative wizards who were complacent began to tend to explore the world outside the wizard land. The originally weak progressive faction has rarely gained the upper hand. The parliament has been troubled by this matter. Yaita Harbor is the most important port leading to the Sea of Mist, so your decision is very important," August said solemnly. "This is the purpose of his coming here." Hearing this, Lin En thought for a moment and did not respond immediately. "So, are you here on behalf of the parliament this time?" "No, it's just a private inquiry." August shook his head and then said frankly, "Personally, I support the idea of opening up the wizard land. Although the wizard land is a huge island that can accommodate more than 600,000 people, as the number of wizards increases, the resources that can be allocated to each person become less and less, and the internal conflicts and competition are becoming more and more intense." Luo also looked at Lin En expectantly. As a young and talented wizard, he is naturally a member of the progressive faction and believes that the world should be ruled by wizards like them. Shrinking in this small wizard land is undoubtedly a manifestation of cowardice and timidity. Luo believes that as long as Lin En and his teacher August stand on the same front, it is very likely to affect the final decision of the parliament. "How much do you know about the Holy See, our enemy?" Lin En suddenly asked. Luo was stunned for a moment, and then spoke with some indignation. "The wizard land has been established and developed for hundreds of years. We have developed countless novel magics that are enough to freeze the sea, turn mountains into plains, and create many indestructible golems that are enough to defeat all enemies." August asked back with interest, "What do you think?" "Mr. Lin, since you come from the Sea of Mist, you should know more than all of us." "Unfortunately, my understanding of the Holy See is very limited. The only people I come into contact with on a daily basis are bishops, who are roughly equivalent to a formal wizard." Lin shook his head, and then continued to speak without waiting for the impatient drawl to speak. "But I think the speakers of the parliament may know better what kind of opponents we need to face." Chapter 165. I'm telling you about the end of the world, and you're telling me about science? Compared to role, who was born in the land of wizards and knew nothing about the outside world and was somewhat blindly optimistic. Lin En naturally thought more. Let's make a simple logical deduction. If the power accumulated in the land of wizards is enough to defeat the Holy See, then the Parliament has no reason to reject a wider world. Then there is only one possibility. The power of the Holy See is not comparable to that of these wizards. Goddess Ella. Lin En couldn't help but think of the terrifying phantom he saw before escaping from the harbor town. If the power of wizards comes from magic, it is based on knowledge to release magic and obtain the power to change the world. Then what is divine art, and why can it be superior to wizards and magic? This is also the most confusing question for Lin En after coming to this different world. Those clergy seem to be able to use divine arts only by relying on firm faith. Under Lin En's wavering attitude, this private conversation can only end hastily. After Roll and August left, Philip hesitated for a long time before asking, "Professor Lin, is the power of the church really that strong? Even the secret society has to succumb to its rule?" The secret society is just an academic organization that studies magic. Lin shook his head. Don't forget, this world is huge. It's not just the land of wizards and the power of the church. I can't be sure how many scholars are from more distant countries. I'm afraid they may not be willing to interfere in the affairs here. Lin patched up again, lest one day the wizards destroyed the church and ruled the empire, and then they couldn't find anyone. Wouldn't that be embarrassing? Late at night, in an ancient manor in Greenreal City, hundreds of wizards in uniforms gathered in the hall, listening devoutly to the speech of a middle-aged wizard. His voice was hoarse and low, with a unique charm. As we all know, the world is moving from order to chaos. Our endless demands for elements have angered the great elemental spirits. The end of all living things is coming. When the 4 stars hang high in the sky, parallel to the silver moon, the elemental spirits will bring down judgment. The earth will sink, and the whole world will fall into the terrifying elemental torrent, until finally the silver moon will be pulled to this continent, completely destroying everything. And the Parliament is still deceiving us to this day. They keep us here, deprive us of our freedom, and guide all wizards to indulge in the plunder of elemental power and accelerate the coming of doomsday. Now, there are only 5 years left before the final judgment of the elemental spirits. We must make everyone give up the idea of controlling and enslaving the elements and let the elements return to order. Otherwise, what awaits us will be only eternal darkness and death. Now let us pray for the forgiveness of the great elemental spirit and obey the will of the elemental spirit, and he will grant us even greater power." As the middle-aged wizard spoke passionately, the atmosphere in the entire hall gradually became hotter, and every wizard's face showed fanaticism. But a few people hesitated. A young witch hesitated for a long time and then spoke. "But, Mr. Lin En said at the seminar a few days ago that this kind of 5-star conjunction is a very normal astronomical phenomenon, which is related to the cycle of the planets. We only need to find the lowest common multiple of the cycles of several planets to infer the time of the next 5-star conjunction, which will occur about once every 70 years. In addition, the speed of the stars themselves and gravity form a new balance. There is no air resistance in a vacuum, and the speed will not suddenly decrease, so the moon will not fall." Then she was interrupted before she finished speaking. "Absurd." An angry expression appeared on the wizard's face. He looked viciously at the young witch who raised the question and shouted harshly, "The planet theory is a complete lie. The wizard who claims to be from the Sea of Mist is nothing but a sinister and cunning liar. He tried to seduce us with the magic trick in this stupid way. This world must be flat, otherwise the sea will flow back, and everything will fall into the bottomless abyss. Think about it. How can we live in a curved world? The land will not be able to be cultivated, and how can houses be built on a rugged road?" The wizard continued in a rhythmic manner, "If what they said is true, then why do they have to measure the angle of the center of the earth in the depths of the sea far away from us, and who of you has witnessed it with your own eyes? All we saw were the 2 paintings they brought back, the news of a so-called successful experiment, and that stupid pendulum driven by alchemical magic." As the wizard kept talking, the wizards in the hall who had some doubts soon reaffirmed their beliefs. What a bunch of brainless lunatics! At this moment, Aiden, who was hiding in the corner of the hall using shadow magic, looked at the wizards who kept echoing like they were possessed, with a mocking look on his face. This so-called doomsday theory is completely unfounded speculation. I don't know if these wizards of the doomsday sect have seawater in their brains. They actually believe in the doomsday and the incomprehensible elemental spirit. Comparing it with the scene a few days ago, when Lord Lin En used an irrefutable rigorous experiment to prove the star picture at the seminar, Aiden couldn't help but sigh. This is the academic spirit that a wizard should have. Don't you think things are a little strange, Aiden? Beside him, another sheriff had a solemn look on his face. He felt that the wizards who came to the meeting were not in a good mood. Even when he was listening to their speeches, he couldn't help but feel a little inexplicable fanaticism in his heart. This might be the influence of some magic. After being reminded by his companions, Aiden soon noticed this. Looking at the red-robed wizard who was chattering on the platform, he recalled the information about the Doomsday sect in his mind. This strange sect was born about 15 years ago. At first, it was not called this name. At best, it could only be regarded as a relatively unpopular academic research organization. Many of the theories put forward are highly consistent with the elemental theory of the legendary wizard Marduk, such as the world is constantly moving from order to chaos, elements may have consciousness, etc. However, in the past 3 years, there have been different changes. Not only did they start to use the name of the sect, but their speeches also became very radical and began to promote the so-called elemental spirits. Now it has even developed to the point where they have begun to openly oppose the parliament. Aiden vaguely realized that things might have been somewhat out of their control. You continue to watch here. I will report the situation here to Lord August. Thinking of this, Aiden whispered, if he left these people alone, they might really cause some trouble. P.S. These 2 chapters are posted a little late. I forgot to set the posting time today. Sorry. Chapter 166 Praise the Great Elemental Spirit. After giving a few instructions in a low voice, Aiden wanted to withdraw, but when he looked at the gate, he was shocked to find that several wizards in red robes had blocked all the entrances and exits. Before we pray to the elemental spirit, there is one more thing to solve. The wizard on the high platform stopped his speech and suddenly said in a cold voice, several rats sent by the parliament have sneaked into our manor. They are the enemies of the elemental spirit and the followers of Doomsday. They will destroy everything we have worked hard to build. Hearing this, the wizards in the hall turned their heads and looked around, shouting loudly, where are those damn guys? I will tear them apart. For the elemental spirit. The crowd was excited, but they did not find where the enemy was, and even began to doubt and criticize each other. Aiden, who was hiding in the shadows, was sweating profusely. He did not dare to confirm whether the other party had really seen through his concealment technique or was bluffing him to lure them out. There are at least 300 wizards in this hall. There is no chance of winning against them head-on. Aiden looked around and stared at the window. At this moment, the wizard in red robes on the high platform took out a strange statue from his arms. It was black in color, but the surface was emitting a blue light. Then the light became brighter and brighter, and soon covered the entire hall. Oops! Aiden suddenly saw the wizard sitting on the high platform, looking at his hiding place. He thought it was not good, and immediately rushed out of his hiding place, broke away from the shadow state, and quickly rushed to the nearest window sill. His colleagues at the side activated the magic that had been ready for a long time. 3-ring spell, flame torrent. The hot tongues of fire ignited in the hall and rolled straight towards the wizards of the Doomsday sect, but were soon blocked by a rising magic barrier. The next moment, the angry wizards launched a counterattack, with dozens of ice and fire spells, almost instantly tearing the sheriff who stayed behind to pieces. Aiden listened to the explosions, hisses and screams coming from the back, and his heart couldn't help but bleed. But he didn't stop at all, and his steps were even faster. He couldn't care about anything else. The most important thing now was to escape successfully and spread the news. With the moment gained by his colleague's sacrifice, he was only 2 or 3 meters away from the nearest windowsill. However, at this moment, the red-robed wizard who had been watching took action. Aiden's heart beat violently, and he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. He could clearly feel that a strong breath locked on him. Do you think you can run away? In front of the great elemental spirit, The shadow can't protect you. The red-robed man stretched out his right hand, and in an instant, a giant fire whip more than 10 meters long appeared out of thin air and lashed Aiden's back fiercely. Bang! With a muffled sound, the mage shield on his body was instantly broken. Aiden felt as if he was struck by lightning. He felt as if his spine was broken into 2 pieces. He was forced to break away from the shadow state and fell to the ground. Aiden spat out a mouthful of blood, supported his body with both hands and stood up with difficulty. He gritted his teeth, endured the pain all over his body, looked at the red-robed wizard in front of him, and showed a look of horror. With a casual blow, he broke his shadow and shattered the mage shield. This means that the other party is likely to be a great wizard. However, in the entire wizard land, all the great wizards added up to only more than 30, and he had seen every one of them, and there was no name like the other party. Aiden knew that he had no hope of escaping, so he stopped wasting his efforts and said viciously, "You crazy people are courting death. Even if you kill me now, the Parliament will soon notice it. There is no need to wait until the end of the world. Lord August will soon send you all to meet your elemental spirits." "Really?" The red-robed wizard's face showed a bit of sarcasm and mockery, and then he turned his head to look at the witch who had refuted him before, and said playfully, "Zaya, you can finish him off." The witch named Zaya trembled and kept trying to retreat. Obviously, she didn't have the courage to do so, but the wizards beside her pushed her forward. Aiden looked at the witch who walked tremblingly in front of him, and a trace of anger ignited in his heart. These days, when he was investigating the Doomsday cult, he also collected a lot of information about the members. This witch named Zaya should be just an apprentice who had just joined not long ago. He didn't expect that the other party would do such a thing and was ready to use her own life as a token of surrender to coerce others. Aiden thought so, but the next moment, there was only horror on his face. The red-robed wizard held up the strange statue and shouted evilly, "Feel the power given to you by the elemental spirit." A burst of red light lit up from the statue's pupils, and then enveloped Zia, who was hesitating. The witch suddenly felt that something was forced into her mind, and then the magic power in her body became agitated and was quickly drained. After just 1 second, a ball of fire rose from her palm and condensed into a fireball the size of a human head. Zia could even feel the violent power contained inside. This was not a first-ring magic fireball, but a more powerful second-ring magic, pyroblast. Although the pyroblast she released was 1 size smaller than normal, Zia didn't care, and she was completely in a state of excitement. As an apprentice, she actually used such a powerful second-ring magic. Obviously, this was all the power given to her by the great elemental spirit. "Praise the great elemental spirit!" Zia shouted excitedly, without any confusion in her heart, and without hesitation threw the violent fireball in her hand at the terrified Aiden. "Praise the great elemental spirit!" Amid the explosions, broken bodies and flames, the wizards in the hall also echoed enthusiastically, and they were even more convinced of the words that the end of the world was approaching. They must force all wizards to give up the idea of enslaving the elements, as long as they correct this mistake and pray to the great elemental spirit for atonement. Then everyone will gain his approval and be given more powerful power. The wizard in a red robe watched all this with great satisfaction. The statue in his hand had closed its eyes and seemed to be chewing something in its mouth. Let's start today's prayer ceremony. Chapter 167, Naming the Planet. On Sunday morning, in Greenreal, the residents of the IATA school, several convoys driven by fire lions have stopped steadily in front of the gate of the manor. On the fluttering flag is a pattern of the all-seeing eye. It is well known in the wizard city today. It is the mark of the Secret Law Society. Professor Lin, we'd better move faster, otherwise we will be late. Philip waited in front of the door early, and urged from a distance. Lin, who walked out with Johnny, Elrock and other apprentices, changed into a golden and red robe at this moment. It was sewn by an alchemist master. It was blessed with the triple magic of dust removal, medium element resistance, and nature's blessing, which can provide good protection for the wearer and enhance certain physical activity. Of course, this also means a high price. Just this robe, plus several convoys, cost him a full 1,000 magic gold coins, which made Lin feel distressed. If the 4,000 gold coins he spent on the manor were added, he could be said to have returned to the pre-liberation era overnight. But according to Philip, he is now a person of status, and this time he is going to attend the awarding ceremony, so he still needs to be grand. Fortunately, thinking that Darren and others have already made the first batch of glass, it won't be long before there will be a new and continuous income, and Lin En's heart is balanced. Riding in the convoy driven by the Fire Lion, the group soon arrived in front of the Corona Tower. The Magic Council, the authority of the entire wizard land, is established here. Lin En looked up at the giant sky mirror on the top of the tower. It is the core area of the Magic Council, and only certified members can set foot in it on weekdays. The annual awarding ceremony is held in the sky mirror. At this time, thousands of people have gathered in the square inches front of the tower. It can be said that all the wizards and Green Real have come. No one wants to miss today's grand ceremony. The awarding of the Corona medal may not happen once in 100 years. Seeing Lin En coming down from the carriage, the wizards gathered in the square surrounded him enthusiastically, congratulating him one after another. Some people wanted to curry favor with this rising magic star, and all kinds of flattery continued. Lin En didn't feel anything, and responded one by one with ease. As for Philip, Kevin, Orlando and other wizards of the Yata school, they were completely immersed in the flattery. Even some great scholars and great wizards would take the initiative to come up and talk to them. They were all quite flattered. Philip suddenly felt that his decision to take the risk of letting Lin En lead the Yata school was absolutely correct. Congratulations, Mr. Lin En, you are the first three-ring wizard in history to receive such an honor. This will definitely go down in the history of magic, Raphael said with a smile, and stretched out his hand to lead the way for several people. Thank you for your praise, Master Raphael. Lin En responded and followed him into the Corona Tower. The two guards at the door bowed slightly after seeing Lin En and his party. As the core of the parliament, the interior of the tower was built magnificently, like a small palace. Countless wide jade pillars supported the dome of the entire hall, shining under the illumination of magic lamps. The marble floor reflected the crystal-clear luster. Many complicated alchemical runes were engraved on the walls on both sides, and in the center was a winding staircase leading to the top of the tower. The Parliament is considering giving this continent under our feet. No, I mean the planet, a new name. We discussed it for a long time and there was no answer. Finally, it was decided that you, the founder of the planetary theory, would name it. Raphael led a few people up the stairs, smiling and talking, while walking towards the sky mirror on the top of the tower. Naming the planet, Philip and his friends were all amazed. This was definitely an honor, no less than awarding a medal. Lin En had not expected that the Parliament would entrust him with such an important task. It was the first time for him to name a planet, not to mention the extremely important planet with life under their feet. How about calling it Earth, or the Blue Star? Lin En thought to himself whether he should give it a familiar name as a remembrance, but after thinking for a long time, he shook his head. Why not call it the Eternal Star? Lin En pondered for a while and said, The Eternal Star? Raphael pondered for a while, nodded, and said with a smile, Then may it stand upright in the universe, forever and ever. While the few people were talking, the stairs under their feet, which were blessed with magic and would automatically rise and fall, quickly sent them to the sky realm on the top floor. This is the hub of the entire wizard land and the place where important meetings are held. The brilliance of magic has permeated almost every aspect, and the richness of magic is far better than any place Lin En has been to. As soon as Raphael led everyone into the room, he attracted countless eyes. Lin En turned his eyes to the high platform of the Parliament, where there were 5 chairs, which were the seats of the 5 legendary wizards and the Parliament presidents. In addition to Huv, who was very familiar to him, 2 other speakers had already arrived. One was a thin old man with gray hair, the legendary alchemist, magic creator, Vittorio. The other was a beautiful witch in a bright red dress. These days, Lin En had also inquired about a lot of information, so he could naturally recognize that this was the founder of the prophecy school, Witch, Aurora. Lin En's eyes stayed on the witch for a long time, not because of her beautiful appearance, but because he was a little concerned about her identity as the founder of the prophecy school. He did not forget that he had refuted the wizards of the prophecy school speechless at the seminar, which was equivalent to slapping their face. Lin En could only hope that the other party was not a grudge holder. As for the remaining 2 chairs, they were empty. It was almost 9 in the morning, and it was time for the awarding ceremony to begin, but the wizards in the Sky Realm did not move, as if they were waiting for something. It is said that the legendary wizard of the plastic school, Lord Phase, who possesses the power of the dragon, will also attend this ceremony. He may be late. Raphael explained in a low voice. What about the other legendary master? Lin En asked curiously. Lord, Element Master, Arduk may not be able to attend such a grand event now. Raphael shook his head and explained very tactfully. There are rumors in the wizard land that this legendary wizard encountered a terrifying monster called the Elemental Ghost when he was studying microscopic elements. His spirit was severely damaged, so his words and deeds are a bit not normal. P.S. Thank you for the reward from the leader DSF23DD. I am so moved. I thought it would be difficult for this book to have a leader. Wait for me to sort out the plot and add more as soon as possible. Chapter 168 Legend. Is the secret society you mentioned really that magical? As everyone below was anxiously waiting, Magic Creator Vittorio looked at her in surprise and asked in confusion. He had been busy optimizing an alchemy formation for some time and had not paid much attention to the affairs in Greenreal City. It was not until the past few days that he heard several masters of the Alchemy Association mention this matter. They praised Lin En from the Sea of Mist and the mysterious secret society throughout the article, which made Vittorio very curious. Yes, I have had some exchanges with several legendary wizards in the secret society. They understand the universe, stars, time and space far better than you and me. Rav paused here, changed his tone, shook his head and sighed. No, or rather, they are not comparable at all. In the last legendary wizard gathering, when discussing the birth and death of the universe, he could only describe it as embarrassment, because he couldn't understand the words the other party said at all. The only thing that can be confirmed is the concept of galaxy redshift, but even so, Rif can hear that this theory is logically rigorous. He even has a feeling that the universe should be like this. Vittorio felt that Rif's description was a bit too mysterious. He was unwilling to believe that a wizard organization from the Sea of Misty Sea could surpass the entire Greenreal's 300 years of continuous development and improvement of magic theory. While the two were chatting, the voices of discussion in the Sky Realm were getting louder and louder. Now it has been a full hour and a half since the awarding ceremony began. What's going on with Phase? Vittorio also felt a little strange. Logically speaking, Phase should not be absent from the awarding of the Corona Medal. Such an important event. Maybe something delayed him, Aurora said casually. Herav hesitated for a moment and decided not to wait any longer. He would hold the awarding ceremony first. If he kept waiting, it would probably have to be postponed, according to the rules of the Parliament, except for things that could affect the survival of Greenreal, such as declaring war, completely opening up the wizarding land, and increasing the number of speaker seats. As long as more than half of the speakers and members of the Parliament agreed and no speaker expressed clear opposition, it would be enough for the other important proposals. Thinking of this, Herav stood up, cleared his throat, and said, since Speaker Phase has something urgent to do, let's get straight to today's agenda. As soon as the words fell, the originally noisy hall suddenly quieted down, and everyone turned their eyes to the podium. First of all, Mr. Balin, the vitality potion you developed can quickly restore a wizard's physical strength, and the materials are simple and have a high popular value. According to the review of the seminar, I will award you a Morning Star badge as a commendation. Herav looked at a wizard sitting in the front row. Varen stood up excitedly, and his wrists were shaking when he received the medal. The medal awarding ceremony on weekdays was hosted by the great wizards of the seminar, such as Raphael, but this time it was different. It was directly issued by the legendary wizard himself, which could be regarded as someone's help. Then, Herav issued the Morning Star Medal to several wizards who had made considerable contributions. In addition to academic achievements, this is another way to gain glory, that is, to make outstanding contributions to the prosperity and development of the wizard land, or to perform some important tasks and eliminate the enemy. August was also on the list. When Heretics made corresponding evaluations for each person's achievements, Lin En realized that these people received medals basically because of one thing: clear out those psychic wizards who are still on the run and are constantly causing trouble. A few years ago, although several great wizards sent by the Parliament successfully wiped out the evil wizard school where Merc was, they still left a lot of trouble. This time, August solved an important leader among the remaining wizards of the Genic school, the right-hand man that the evil wizard Merc valued the most, the great wizard Cosimo. However, everyone present knew that the awarding of these medals was just an appetizer. As expected, Rev soon turned his attention to Lin. Finally, it's His Excellency Lin. The planetary theory and gravity theory he proposed completely overturned the previous wizard's understanding of the entire world. It is a very groundbreaking and significant theory. He used several exquisite experiments to verify that these magic theories are not simple fantasies, but ironclad facts. In the future, the 3 laws of the stars and the formula of universal gravitation will also be required papers for studying force field magic. In view of the achievements made by His Excellency Lin, the Parliament unanimously decided to award him the highest crown of magic academics, the Corona Medal. Heretics shouted loudly, and his voice kept echoing in the sky, making the atmosphere of the whole venue particularly warm. There was also a wave of applause, and Philip and others clapped their hands desperately, as if they wanted to make the wave more violent. Lin stood up and walked towards the high platform. The wizards around him cast all kinds of envious, longing and amazed glances. A former wizard from the Sea of Mist, with a few academic works, has become the most dazzling new star in the entire wizarding land in just a few days. Many young wizards have imagined and determined to study magic hard after returning, so that they can also get this honor one day. Heretics solemnly took the box handed over by a congressman, in which was placed a very special medal. It was dark gold all over and had a luster similar to that of a gem. The material used was very precious and could not be found in any known corner of the world. The front of the medal is painted with the logo of the Parliament, and behind it is a towering Corona tower. In addition to its exquisite appearance and the glory that comes with it, it is also a powerful alchemical item that can be used to activate a 6-ring protective spell, Vittorio's Barrier, either actively or when life is threatened. However, it is a one-time use. After releasing this magic, all the magic power inside will be exhausted, and it can only be used as an ordinary medal of honor. Medals such as the Morning Star and Silver Moon are also blessed with protective magic of corresponding levels, which can be regarded as a kind of protection for those who are extremely talented in academic research or have made outstanding contributions to the development of the wizarding land. Just as Herv was about to take out the medal, a hand reached out and took up the Corona medal first. "Let me do it." Chapter 169 The Dragon Falling from the Sky. At some point, Aurora stood up and took over Herv's work. She smiled charmingly and walked towards Lin. Seeing this, Lin was quite surprised. Thinking of the previous conflicts with the prophecy school, he was worried that the other party might want to take this opportunity to embarrass him. However, Aurora's next move was completely beyond Lin's expectations. The legendary witch skillfully embedded the dark golden Corona medal on Lin's chest, then suddenly leaned in and kissed Lin on the forehead, whispering in his ear, "Good afternoon, my brown star." Lin turned his head in astonishment, and saw Aurora's smile and blue-purple eyes. The wizards and counselors who came to watch the ceremony in the Sky Realm were also surprised. In an instant, all kinds of discussions, gossips and suspicions continued. Even Herv was stunned, wondering what Aurora was doing. The legendary witch did not have any intention of explaining, as if she was just joking on impulse. After putting the medal on Lin En, she returned to her seat. Lin En was stunned for a long time, completely unable to understand why Aurora suddenly made such an intimate move. This should be their first meeting. Could it be that this legendary witch has taken a fancy to him? Lin En couldn't help but shudder. But he would not be fooled by Aurora's young and beautiful appearance. Since the other party has become a legendary wizard, her age is probably several times his. But what does the brown star mean? Lin En was confused. According to Philip, Many people now call him Greenreal's Gemini. So is this also a new nickname? Hey, Mr. Lin En, you have won the highest award in Magic Academia. Don't you have anything to say? Prv coughed lightly, easing the atmosphere and drawing everyone's attention back to the topic. Lin En also reacted immediately and looked at the wizards present and spoke. I am honored that my doctrine and theory have been recognized by the Parliament. In fact, this honor does not belong to me alone. The 3 laws of the stars were jointly discussed and studied by many scholars in the Secret Law Society. I just summarized the laws based on the research of the predecessors and verified this theorem with experiments. The road to pursuing the truth of magic is destined to be rugged. All our research results are just an explanation of the appearance of things. The grandeur and mystery of the world are far beyond everyone's imagination. Wizards are like wandering in the sea, rejoicing for every isolated island they find. But I believe that one day, we will be able to reach the continent called truth and find all the answers. Lin En looked around, paused, and continued. Of course, all this requires the joint efforts of all wizards. When I was in the Secret Law Society, I heard a saying and used it as the basis for academic research. Practice is the only criterion for testing truth, Lin En said decisively. The crowd who were still gossiping about the relationship between Lin En and Aurora were soon attracted by the speech, and warm applause followed. Very wonderful speech, Mr. Lin En, Prv said with appreciation, and then did not let Lin En step down, and continued. In addition to the Corona Medal, the Magic Council has decided to grant you another seat as a counselor. Let's vote now. If the Corona Medal represents honor, then being a counselor means an improvement in status. All major measures in the wizarding land are discussed and voted on by the council. There are thousands of wizards in the entire wizarding land, but there are only 150 seats for counselors, in addition to more than 30 great wizards. The remaining counselors are 3 ring wizards who are outstanding in various fields. For example, Tick, whom Lin En had met, obtained the status of a counselor with his superb alchemy. However, everyone understands that from today on, there will be one more seat in the parliament. The so-called voting is just a formality. No one would want to openly oppose a rising magic star. The final result is naturally a unanimous vote. Lin En thanked him again, and her then announced that the awarding ceremony was officially over. The wizards gathered in the Sky Realm stood up with a sense of satisfaction, discussing Lin En's speech just now, and whispering about the relationship between Lin En and the witch. Just as everyone was about to leave, a rapid bell suddenly rang from a distance. The noisy Parliament Hall suddenly became quiet, and the faces of several legendary wizards changed, and they all looked up at the sky. Lin En also looked over with the others, and saw a huge monster slowly approaching above the blue sky. Through the farsighted magic, Tick's farsightedness, Lin En could see clearly that it was a hideous black dragon. Its wingspan exceeded 30 meters, and the dark scales glowed with a cold and icy light, like a piece of extremely solid steel, which made people feel fear when they stared at it. Lord Phase is too late. Raphael laughed immediately. He was a little surprised before why the magic bell that announced the alarm suddenly rang. It seemed that it was just a false alarm. The power of a giant dragon? Lin En immediately remembered the other party's name. It seems that this is the reason. Speaking of which, it was the first time he saw a creature like a giant dragon. Lin En looked at it curiously for a few more times, but soon realized that something seemed wrong. The black dragon's flight path was crooked and shrouded in a gloomy and dead atmosphere. After flying over the sky of Greenreal City, it opened its mouth and let out a painful roar, and fell straight down. How could it be? Lord Phase. The black dragon smashed into the ground, and the violent shock it caused seemed to shake the entire Greenreal City. For a while, panicked shouts were heard in the parliament. In the speaker's seat, several legendary wizards had already disappeared, and they had obviously left first. What should we do now? Professor Lin En, Philip and others who came to the front and were going to ask Lin En about the gossip with the legendary witch were no longer able to care about it at this moment, and hurriedly asked, "Let's go and have a look together." Lin En didn't hesitate much. If there was any problem in Greenreal, the hub of the wizard land, then Ida Harbor would not be immune. When they arrived, the place was already full of people. A huge black dragon was lying in a pool of blood, surrounded by ruins. It was covered with scars, and the wound on its abdomen was so deep that the bone was visible. The bright red blood was flowing, emitting a strong stench. Fortunately, because of the awarding ceremony, most people gathered near the Corona Tower, so there were no casualties. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170, The Magic Stone Mine, Space-Time Gate and the Legendary Monster. Aurora and Vittorio arrived at the scene early. After checking FaZe's injuries, their expressions became a little solemn. The atmosphere on the scene was also extremely dull, and the wizards watching were all uneasy. Speakers. "How is Lord FaZe?" a wizard from the plastic school asked anxiously. Roof did not reply, and Aurora looked at the wizards gathered here with panic and said, "Although his injuries are not light, they are not life-threatening. He just needs a period of recuperation." Hearing this, the wizards present were relieved and their tense nerves relaxed a little, but they still wanted to know what kind of enemy could hurt FaZe, a legendary wizard, like this. Several legendary wizards did not intend to explain, and cast a spell together to turn FaZe back into a wizard, and then called the best potion master to send FaZe to recuperate. After doing all this, Prov turned to look at Lin En and other members of the parliament, and signaled them to come to the Sky Realm tonight to hold the next meeting. Late at night, on the top floor of the Corona Tower, in the meeting hall of the Sky Realm, all 151 members have arrived. Compared with the lively and noisy scene in the morning, the meeting room at this moment seems unusually solemn. Only a few members are talking privately, and everyone's face is filled with worry and anxiety. "Lord of, I'm afraid that Speaker FaZe's injury is not that simple, right?" In the silence, August asked first. A group of members of the parliament also looked over immediately, waiting for Prov's answer. "Yes, FaZe was seriously injured this time. I have given him the resurrection potion, but the situation is still not optimistic." Prov shook his head and sighed. "Then what happened?" "To attack Lord FaZe?" Raphael asked in confusion. The only people in the entire wizard land who could threaten the legendary wizard were a few speakers of the same level. But soon Raphael suddenly seemed to remember something and said in astonishment, "Could it be that there is a problem in the magic mine area?" If he remembered correctly, the direction from which FaZe flew was exactly where the magic stone mine was located. FaZe has a life-threatening wound in his abdomen. It is possible that he met the Eye Demon, the Lord of Death, or other more powerful beings there. Prov frowned, and the faces of the councillors became more solemn with each name he mentioned. Only Lin En had a confused expression on his face. He turned his head to look at Tick and asked quietly. After Tick's explanation, Lin En realized that there was a very large magic crystal mine in the giant mountain Kogar not far from Greenreal. The magic power inside was so rich that it was unimaginable. Therefore, the time and space of the entire area was distorted and chaotic, and even a strange magic vortex was formed at the core. It is like a naturally formed time and space gate, but no one knows what is on the other side of the time and space gate. The wizard land once sent several teams to explore, but no one came back alive. Some people speculate that the other side is likely to be connected to another huge magic stone mine, but some wizards believe that it may lead to another world. After all, every once in a while, some monsters they have never seen will emerge from the magic vortex. It is precisely because Greenreal has such rich monsters and mineral resources that a small wizard land can support so many formal wizards. However, there are also many troubles. For example, more than 10 years ago, several mind flayers that appeared inexplicably in the mine cave broke through the heavy guards with their strange mental power and caused a lot of trouble in the wizard land. In the end, the parliament took a lot of effort to find them one by one and clean them up. Just when Lin En asked, Prov was discussing the next action with a group of speakers and members. The distance between the giant mountain Kogar and Greenreal City is too close. A powerful and unknown monster has appeared inside, which is undoubtedly a huge threat. Many members of parliament have proposed to immediately form a team led by a legendary wizard and composed of great wizards to search and eliminate this monster as soon as possible. Tick and others think that this suggestion is too risky, because they don't even know what kind of monster attacked the legendary wizard phase. Their number and ability are all unknown. If they act rashly, there may be a lot of casualties. We can wait for Lord Phase to wake up, ask about the situation, and then decide what to do. Raphael proposed, but was refuted the next second. It's easy to say, but Lord Phase is seriously injured now. No one can be sure when he will wake up. If we delay too long, the monster will roam in the wizard land like the Mind Flayer, causing greater trouble. Who will deal with it then? Otherwise, we can send a few people to investigate the situation first. Who to send? Send you? What's the difference between that and committing suicide? The whole conference hall was in chaos, and the members of parliament soon split into two groups. Go to the magic stone mine immediately to solve this trouble, so as not to expand the incident again, or investigate first and figure out the situation first. The two groups of people argued with each other, and the intensity was getting higher and higher. Many people took the opportunity to vent their fears. Lin En did not participate in it. On the one hand, he had just become a member of parliament and did not understand the process of parliament. On the other hand, there was too little information, and he could not think of any perfect plan. After some urgent consultations, Prov quickly made a decision and planned to cut the Gordian knot. The three speakers led the team together, and brought 9 great wizards who were proficient in alchemy to ensure that there would be no mistakes. The universal gravitation theory proposed by Lin En before gave him a lot of inspiration. This time, they might be able to set up an alchemy array to further restrict the strange space-time gate and prevent similar situations from happening again. Thinking of this, Riv hesitated whether to take Lin En with him for this operation, but after repeated consideration, he gave up the idea. The situation inside the magic stone mine is still unknown. Even Phase was seriously injured. The danger can be imagined. Although Lin En has a deep understanding of the stars and gravity theory, he is only a formal wizard and lacks the ability to protect himself. Once in danger, he may not even be able to resist. August, during the time we are away, you will preside over the affairs of the parliament, Prov solemnly ordered. Thank you for your trust, Mr. Speaker. August put his hand on his chest and saluted respectfully. Chapter 171. Unless someone is willing to use magic to pull the moon down from the sky. In the next few days, due to the attack on Phase, the whole Green Real was somewhat panicked. After all, it was impossible to conceal the fall of such a big black dragon. Although the parliament came out to clarify at the first time, saying that the legendary wizard was attacked by an unknown monster in the magic stone mine, and now he is fine, but he just needs some time to recuperate. It was unable to stop the rumors from getting worse. In Green Real, the legendary wizard is the pinnacle of their cognition, the supreme big man. There has never been an example of a legendary wizard being attacked and severely injured in the past. This means that the wizard city, which originally seemed to them to be extremely safe, may no longer be safe. There are even rumors that the powerful monsters that appeared in the magic stone mine are a sign of the coming of the end of the world. Those wizards of the Doomsday sect said that when the 4 planets and the silver moon are parallel in the sky, the end of the world will come. The torrent of elements will sweep the entire continent, and the moon will fall from the sky. Lydia vividly recounted the gossip she heard when she went out to purchase. This is ridiculous. Alok interrupted Lydia with a sneer before she finished. Didn't you hear what the professor said at the seminar a few days ago? The orbits of the stars are very stable. How could the moon suddenly fall down? Johnny, Pierce and others also took this as a joke. Aren't you right, Professor? Alok turned his head and looked at Lin En, saying with a smile. Lin En, who was writing the topic, pondered for a moment. Unless someone is willing to use magic to pull the moon down, or our luck is extremely bad, and a huge cosmic meteorite or a wandering asteroid hits the moon, causing it to deviate from its orbit and then hit us. Alok and others looked at each other. Originally, they thought that the end of the world was completely nonsense, but after Lin En's careful analysis, it seemed as if it could really happen. Fortunately, Lin En quickly said something to comfort them. But in general, this possibility is very small. Even a legendary wizard may not be able to affect a massive star at such a long distance. As for an asteroid hitting the moon, it is much lower than the probability of a fire lion suddenly giving birth to a dragon. Alok breathed a sigh of relief. He almost believed that the end of the world was really coming. Compared with the apprentices who regarded the doomsday talk as a joke, Lin En felt something was wrong. The legendary wizard phase, known as the power of the dragon, had just been attacked, and the so-called doomsday rumors spread in Greenreal City, which made Lin En have to suspect that someone was deliberately creating panic. You know, the end of the world and salvation are the only way to absorb faith. This has been confirmed many times in the previous life. This kind of organization named after a sect made Lin En think of the church at once, but normally, pagans should be more annoying to the church than wizards like them. Lin En couldn't help but shake his head. Although there was a mouthpiece like the Magic Daily, the Parliament's attention to public opinion was obviously far from enough. If someone dared to do this in the Ida Harbor, he would have sent people to arrest and torture all those guys who spread doomsday rumors. Lord Lin En, we have finally reproduced it. At this moment, in the small workshop in the manor, Darren, who was covered in dust, rushed out of the door in a hurry. There were several holes burned on his dirty robe, and he looked quite embarrassed, but he was holding several pieces of transparent glass in his hands, and his face was full of joy. The apprentices present surrounded him impatiently, and each of them picked up a piece of glass and looked at it carefully, as if looking for something. This time there is no flaw at all, Darren said confidently. Before, when they made glass according to the method given by Lin En, there were always many bubbles left inside. It took him many days to overcome this technical difficulty. Lin En took the glass from Darren, looked at it for a few times, nodded with satisfaction, and then asked, "Where are the paper pages I asked you to make?" "We are already in the final ironing and cutting process. Tomorrow, at the latest, we will see the results," Darren said with excitement. The techniques that Lin En taught them could only be described as magical. Those paper pages that looked lighter and thinner than the feathers of a white swan were made of wood that could be found everywhere. If he hadn't seen Lin En turn a pile of sand and stones into glass with his own eyes, he would have thought that the other party was joking with him. Lin En then looked at Johnny and the others. "What about you? How have you mastered the engraving magic I taught you?" "I can now record 41 words at a time," Alok said proudly. "I can only remember 37 words." Pierce shook his head. Then the two looked at Johnny. 69. Johnny hesitated and said. Elrock and Pierce were shocked. The gap was so big. They didn't know that their companion had already become a formal wizard. They thought that Johnny's great power last time was due to the power of the alchemical tool, Magic Hand. In fact, recording 69 words at a time is not the limit for the girl, but about 300 words. Very good. In this case, you can start recording today. Lin En handed over the organized theory of gravity and 2 Olympiad books. The so-called engraving magic is a new zero-ring witchcraft he developed. Even apprentices can use it. Its principle is similar to movable type printing. It is necessary to build a corresponding template in the brain first, and then the corresponding magic mark can be engraved on paper pages, parchment rolls, and desks. In other words, every wizard who has learned engraving magic is a human-shaped printing press, and its power is determined by computing power. Professor, the questions you asked are too difficult. Alok took a book called Advanced Mathematics, flipped through a few pages, and after thinking for a while, his face wrinkled together. There was only one thought in his mind. Are these questions really solved by humans? A few days ago, a master of mathematics in the secret society asked me to find a group of wizards with excellent talents in mathematics to jointly solve a difficult problem in the mathematics world. The questions I asked were to screen out these people, so they were naturally more difficult. Lin En explained. Of course, this was just an excuse. In fact, he was going to use this as an excuse to absorb a group of wizards with amazing calculation power into the magic field. Chapter 172. Can humans really solve these problems? The powerful monsters that appeared inexplicably in the Magic Stone mine recently and the Doomsday sect that suddenly appeared made Lin En smell a hint of danger. The former is not something he can worry about. If those legendary wizards can't solve this problem together, it will be useless for him to add himself. The latter is a problem that the current manager August needs to consider, but Lin En will not rely entirely on others for his own safety. so it has become an urgent matter to find a way to improve his own strength and deal with potential threats freely. Continuing to promote the wizard level is undoubtedly the best choice, but he has just been promoted to the second ring wizard not long ago. Even though the huge power brought by the Eye of Death has not been completely exhausted, the magic power is still in a stage of rapid growth, but there is still a distance from the next promotion. So Lin En has no choice but to start from other aspects, such as when he fought against Helram. With the help of the computing power of 9 third-ring wizards, he can even briefly compete with a 5th-ring wizard. Although Helram was tricked by him and suffered the backlash of magic, the strength he could exert was only about 30% to 40% of the original, but that was enough to crush ordinary formal wizards. It was precisely because of this that in the days since arriving in Greenreal, in addition to preparing materials for speeches and experiments, Lin En spent most of his time making new, secret rings. As a distinction, these newly made rings are not as gorgeous as the ones given to Of, and they will not teleport the people who carry them to outside time and space, but to a planet in the magic field. Recently, the intelligent brain is working frantically to find the second gathering place as soon as possible. In the end, Lin En set the number of people in the magic field this time at 12. The reason for limiting the number is that his brain has limited tolerance, and the more computing power he mobilizes, the better. Secondly, the magic field is in the stage of being just built, and it will be difficult to recruit too many people at once if it is exposed. As for the legendary wizard Of, who had entered the magic field before, Lin En did not dare to let the intelligent brain try to crack the other party's mental frequency. After all, the gap in strength between the two sides was too big, and it was very likely to be discovered. Those 3-ring wizards were his real targets. At that time, with deflection field as protection and space vibration as a means of attack, even if facing a great wizard, he would not be completely defenseless. 2 days later, at noon, in Greenreal City, a temporarily rented magic shop had already been surrounded by people. "Is this a glass mirror?" A young witch picked up a palm-sized round mirror in surprise. The smooth and flawless mirror surface perfectly reflected her beautiful face. Her white skin, red lips, and even the hair on her forehead could be seen clearly. Almost instantly, the witch was captured. She looked at it over and over again, and was reluctant to put the mirror down. In addition to being able to clearly reflect her face, the glass mirror itself looked like a work of art. However, the high price made the young witch hesitate. It seemed that the higher the quality and the larger the glass mirror, the higher the price. A full-length glass mirror was sold for 20 magic gold coins. Even for a wizard, it was not a small amount. "Beautiful witch, this magical glass mirror is very limited in quantity and the production process is extremely complicated. For example, the largest full-length glass mirror only has the last one left. I don't know when the next batch will be made. If you miss it today, I don't know how long you will have to wait." Darren, who was in charge of the sale, talked endlessly, explaining the scarcity of the glass mirror to the witch in front of him, and repeatedly emphasized that the production of this thing was very low, and there were countless people rushing to buy it. If she came 1 minute later, there would be no mirror left. Seeing this, the young witch dared not hesitate. She gritted her teeth and immediately took out all her savings, a total of 30 magic gold coins, to buy the largest full-length mirror and a small round mirror that she could carry with her. Darren happily opened the drawer and piled the magic gold coins he had just turned into it. In just half an hour, the entire drawer was already filled with golden coins. The hunger marketing method that Lord Lin En talked about was simply too good to be true. In order to target those apprentices and civilians with insufficient purchasing power, in addition to the most popular glass mirrors, they also made a lot of equally exquisite glassware, teapots, teacups and even trays, usually ranging from the 70 silver coins to 5 magic gold coins, but compared to the extremely low production cost, it was no different from robbing money. But in the eyes of other wizards, this is not the case. This kind of exquisitely made glassware like a work of art is undoubtedly a symbol of identity and status. So a wave of purchasing glassware soon swept through the city of Greenreal. There are also many savvy wizards who want to buy it in bulk and then resell it to other cities in the wizarding land at a high price. Also sold out were the two books, Introduction to Mathematical Olympiad, and Advanced Mathematical Olympiad. In addition to wizards who were curious about the thin and white pages, there were also many people who went there just for the Mathematical Olympiad. Tick was one of them. When he listened to Lin En's Mathematical Olympiad class at Iata Harbor, he was deeply shocked by the exquisiteness and rigorous logic of this subject, and naturally he was very interested in Mathematical Olympiad. So this time, when he learned that a Mathematical Olympiad master from the Secret Society was going to invite 12 formal wizards who were extremely talented in mathematics to discuss a difficult problem in Mathematical Olympiad, Tick immediately became interested. He was very confident that he could become one of the 12 people. After all, compared to other wizards, he had listened to Mathematical Olympiad courses for 2 months in advance and laid a solid foundation. Thinking of this, Tick didn't even look at the so-called Introduction to Mathematical Olympiad, but directly opened the more advanced Mathematical Olympiad. However, after seeing the first question, he was stunned. Find the sum of the exponential formula 1 2 plus 2 2 plus 3 2 plus 4 2.99992. After repeatedly confirming that he had not read the exponential symbol wrong, Tick couldn't help but take a breath. From 1 squared to 9,999 squared. He had to calculate the sum. Just writing down the complete formula would fill dozens of pages of manuscript paper. I'm afraid he would have to work for 10 days or half a month without sleep, and he might not be able to get the answer. This is just the first question. Is it really that difficult? Chapter 173, Calculus Concept and Sudden Attack. Tick was completely confused. He thought that he had studied Mathematical Olympiad for 2 months in advance and had sufficient knowledge reserves. He should be able to do Mathematical Olympiad problems easily, but this first question stumped him. If this formula stopped at a few hundred or a few thousand, he could still slowly calculate the result. But the last value was 999,900,000. No, there must be a pattern. Tick quickly reacted. When he was in Iata Harbor, Lin En had played a square board game of summing exponents. It was also a very complicated calculation, but through a wonderful exponential formula, the originally complicated calculation process was easily simplified to the point where an apprentice could calculate it in a short time. Thinking of this, Tick picked up the feather pen and quickly calculated on the manuscript paper, listing the products of the first 10 columns of exponents on the paper, and then adding them one by one, repeatedly pondering the similarities and differences between each value. 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 5, 14, 30, 76. Tick bit the end of his quill and pondered, numbers flashing through his mind. He tried to substitute the exponential summation formula he had learned in the Mathematical Olympiad class, and compared the result with the value obtained. Then he kept changing the formula to find the correct answer. No, 10 numbers are too few, not enough to confirm the pattern. Tick's quill kept shaking on the manuscript paper. One number and symbol after another was written out, but they were quickly crossed out and the calculation started again. Page after page was thrown on the ground, slowly covering his ankles. Unknowingly, it was already dawn. Tick had been calculating for an afternoon and a night. His eyes were full of bloodshot, but his spirit was getting more and more excited. Finally, he stood up suddenly, unable to control his excitement. So that's how it is, just like a person who is already thirsty and hungry walking in the desert, suddenly sees an oasis. Tick was full of energy and took another page of manuscript paper, and matched the previously calculated values with the answers calculated using the formula one by one. All are correct. My formula is correct. Tick was extremely excited, imitating Lin's exponential summation formula, and solemnly wrote down line after line of formulas on the page. Sn equals 1 6, n plus 1 2 n plus 1 n. After writing, Tick sat down again, feeling extremely comfortable. This feeling of discovering unknown rules and summarizing them made people indulge in it. Tick couldn't wait to look at the next question. 5 monkeys found a pile of peaches on the beach and decided to divide them equally the next morning. The first monkey came the earliest, but it couldn't divide the peach equally anyway, so it ate the extra one, and the remaining peach was exactly divided into 5 parts. It took its own part and left. Then the second monkey arrived, unaware that a monkey had already come, and ate one, then divided it into 5 equal parts and kept his own. The third, fourth, and fifth monkeys did the same thing, eating one peach, and the remaining peach could be divided into 5 equal parts. How many peaches are there in total? When he saw this question for the first time, Tick was relieved. Isn't this just a simple equation? What about frogs jumping into wells, snails sliding? He had seen the apprentices do it many times when he was in Iata Harbor. He just needed to set a few unknown numbers and substitute them into the formula for calculation. But when he picked up the pen to start the calculation, Tick suddenly realized that something was wrong, because the conditions given by Lin En this time were too few. The only known condition was that the peaches were divided 5 times, and 1 peach had to be subtracted before each division. As for the number of peaches divided each time and how many peaches were left after the last monkey divided them, they were all unknown. Tick wrote down the existing conditions and thought for a long time. He pulled out several strands of hair. For a moment, he felt like he had no idea where to start. He could not help but have the urge to beat up the person who said the question. Is this really a question that a human can answer? Tick had no choice but to estimate a number and assume it was the total number of peaches. He tried to substitute it into the calculation and then slowly find the pattern. There were many wizards who were tortured by these brain-burning math problems like Tick that night. Most wizards failed on the first 3 questions and angrily tore the manuscript paper in front of them in half or smashed the tables and chairs to pieces. However, the real warriors could go against the current and enjoy this feeling of both pain and happiness. At the same time, Lin En, who was being thought of by hundreds of wizards and wanted to beat him up, was now building a new scene in the magic field. The second gathering place was made into a library by Lin En, which was filled with various Olympiad books. Then Lin En began to think about what bait should be used to attract those wizards to stay in the magic field for a long time. It is not an easy task to crack the mental frequency of a formal wizard and thus call up the opponent's computing power. It took 1 or 2 years for Helrim to complete the cracking of the mental frequency of more than a dozen 3-ring wizards. Lin En did not have so much time to wait slowly, so he thought of a way to speed up the progress, that is, to let these wizards stay in the magic field and do crazy questions to consume mental power, so as to speed up the cracking progress of the intelligent brain. Calculus may be a good choice, enough to burn the brain. Many wizards are still in a confused state of knowing the many theories and formulas he proposed before, but not knowing why. Learning calculus can also help these wizards understand the derivation process of those formulas and theories. Of course, the wizards of Greenreal are not completely ignorant of calculus. For example, the method of cutting a circle that they use to calculate pi, using the circumference of a regular polygon inscribed in a circle to continuously approach the circumference of a circle, applies the knowledge of calculus. There are even wizards who have successfully used a method similar to Mfengai to deduce and calculate the volume of a sphere, and the results obtained are very accurate. It can only be said that smart people are everywhere, but there are not many wizards who are willing to focus on studying mathematics seriously. In the past, most wizards still prefer elements and plasticity, which can intuitively gain power and master magic as long as they study. Basically, only those alchemists will spend time to study this thing in depth. Just as Lin En was thinking, a palpitation that had not come suddenly emerged in his heart. Almost instantly, Lin En broke free from the magic field and opened his eyes suddenly. There was nothing in front of him, but the invisible magic barrier had been added to him. Then there was a slight sound, as if a blade was cutting cloth. A strange dagger slowly emerged from the air, covered with complicated runes, and slashed straight towards his neck. Chapter 174 Demon-Breaking Dagger End. The temporarily released magic barrier was as weak as a piece of paper in front of the strange dagger. However, this momentary pause and the temporary appearance of the figure were enough for Lin En. He stepped hard on the ground with his right foot. With the help of the reaction force, He quickly leaned back and avoided the dagger stabbing at his neck. He fell to the ground with the seat behind him, and then rolled a few times to distance himself. However, Lin En, who stood up again, could not find the enemy's position at all. There was nothing in the lounge, as if everything before was just an illusion, some kind of magic that deceives vision. Lin En cast a mage shield on himself without hesitation. At the same time, the vague danger came again, this time from the side. White phosphorus, resist firing. This time, Lin En, who was fully focused, counterattacked almost instantly. He didn't know where the attack came from, but he didn't need to know either. The blazing fire surged from his body, spreading in all directions without a single dead angle. The bricks and stones on the ground cracked layer by layer, and the hot air waves rolled and rolled everything in. The ring of resistance is one of the results of Lin En's research on force field magic, and it is also a 3-ring upper level magic. This attack alone consumed a quarter of Lin En's magic power, but the effect was also particularly significant. The distance was so close that there was no way to avoid it. The terrifying white phosphorus fire soon attached to the attacker's body. The shrill screams and wails sounded in the lounge, and the appearance of a middle-aged wizard vaguely emerged in the flames. His whole body had been ignited by the flames, and the white phosphorus was gnawing at his flesh and blood like a maggot on the tarsal bone. He could only slap his body with his hands weakly, and it looked like he was dancing in the fire. Just as he guessed, this kind of magic can only deceive the vision, not really disappear. Lin En breathed a sigh of relief, but soon noticed that the wizard who was engulfed by the flames had dropped the weapon he was holding tightly in his hand. It was not a dagger, but a short sword. Lin En's pupils shrank, and a chill surged into his heart again, which meant that there was definitely more than one attacker. The moment he realized this, the mage shield on his body shattered again. Fortunately, the deflection force field worked, and the sudden attack barely passed by. The strange dagger only appeared at the moment of shattering the mage shield, and then disappeared without a trace. However, the fact that no clues can be found visually does not mean that other senses are not good. Lin En's index finger trembled slightly in the air, and a series of imperceptible magic waves spread rapidly in a ring, and returned again after hitting the obstacle. The only object in the room that frequently changed its position in the shape of a human was undoubtedly the first attacker. However, unlike what he expected, the attacker did not approach him again, but ran madly towards the outside world. It was obvious that the 2 consecutive failed attacks, coupled with the tragedy of his companions, had made the other party want to retreat. It was too late to leave now. Lin En's eyes flashed, and he changed the vibration frequency of the magic wave, adjusting it to a frequency similar to that of the brain. Unlike the battle with Ilak and others, Lin En had no intention of holding back this time. Such a special and imperceptible attack immediately took effect. The attacker, who was fleeing at a fast speed, felt as if his brain was about to explode. The whole person rolled to the ground in embarrassment, and could no longer maintain magic. His figure soon appeared. Lin En then saw clearly that the attacker was a man in a gray robe. His cheeks were very thin, his hair was sparse and messy, his eye sockets were deep, his cheekbones were prominent, his hands were tightly grasping his head, his face was hideous, and the whole person looked painful and twisted. The next moment, 4 ice blades emerged from the void and nailed directly into his limbs. Lin En stopped releasing the resonance magic, walked forward, put away the strange dagger, and then looked at the gray-robed wizard who was lying on the ground and unable to move, and asked coldly, "Name, identity, and why did you attack me?" The gray-robed wizard did not intend to reply. His face was full of fear and uncertainty, and it seemed that he had not yet recovered from the pain of his brain bursting. "Forget it, I'll see for myself." Lin En did not use those fancy interrogation methods. He put his hand on the gray-robed wizard's head and activated the psychic magic he got from Logic. Memory retrieval. This psychic magic can search for related memories from a person's brain, but it usually only works when the strength gap is large or the other party is not mentally stable. Obviously, now is a good time, but at the moment when Lin En touched the other party's memory, the pupils of the gray-robed wizard under him suddenly widened, and his body kept shaking. Before Lin En could react, He fell to the ground in an instant and was silent. Is it something similar to soul restriction again? Lin En frowned. He was not unfamiliar with this situation. He had a similar experience when he was interrogating the wizard apprentice named Nur in the port of Yaita. Only a great wizard who is proficient in psychic magic can engrave a soul restriction in the brain of a formal wizard, kill him in an instant, and disrupt his memory. The flames caused by resist fire ring, and the piercing screams and wails were obvious in the silent manner, so the door of the room was knocked open by someone just over a minute after the attack began. Professor Lin En, I just heard the explosion and screams. What happened? Philip and Kevin were the first to rush over, seeing that the other party was standing in the room intact. They breathed a sigh of relief. I don't know either. I was about to rest tonight when I was attacked by these two people. Lin En kicked the corpse at his feet and said in confusion. During the days since he arrived at Green Reel, he seemed to have offended the wizards of the prophecy school. If they wanted to take action, they should have done so before the theory of gravity was released and verified. It couldn't be that someone was angry and ready to kill him because the math problems he asked were too difficult, right? Philip and Kevin looked at the two attackers. The first one was nailed to death by Lin En's ice blade, and the other one had been burned by the hot white phosphorus fire and was no longer alive. The exposed skin was torn off during the struggle, the blood was evaporated, and there were holes on the chest where fingers were scratched. The death was extremely horrible. The remaining white phosphorus flames were still devouring the flesh and blood as nutrients to strengthen its own strength. Is this the so-called fire from hell? Philip and Kevin immediately remembered the hellfire that destroyed the harbor town that Loud mentioned when Lin En first came to Yaita College. At first they didn't take it seriously, but now after seeing the death of the attacker, they realized the horror of this fire, which is worthy of the name Hell. Chapter 175 Doomsday Cultists. In addition to Philip and his men, the security team that received the news also rushed to the scene at a very fast speed, led by August himself. After checking the two attackers and recording the details, August asked several wizards to take the two down to check their identities to see if they could find any clues, and then looked at Lin En and asked with concern, "You are not injured, right? Lord Lin En, do you need to ask a potion master to come over?" Lin En shook his head, indicating that he was not seriously injured, and then heard August sighing and saying, "That's good. In fact, this is the fourth attack in the past 2 days. Before you, 3 counselors have been attacked. You are the only one who survived so far." Lin En paused. He didn't expect that the matter would be so serious. Attacking multiple counselors openly was simply rubbing the face of the entire wizarding land on the ground. "Lord Lin En, you should have found a way to keep one alive. If you could ask something, we wouldn't be so passive." Lower on the side couldn't help but speak out. The entire security team has been extremely busy these past 2 days. There have been a series of attacks in Greenreal City, and the victims are extremely important members of parliament. The pressure on them can be imagined. August, who is acting as the speaker, has been criticized by many people. In order to avoid causing widespread panic, the parliament immediately blocked the news and ambushed several members of parliament who are proficient in elemental science based on the common points of the attacker's target selection. Unexpectedly, the target of the attack this time is Lin En, who is located in another district. You can't say that, Lower. A raid like this is no different from an ordinary battle. Even the most powerful wizards will be careless. It is a blessing to be able to survive. August shook his head, refuted Lower's words, and then spoke again. "But Mr. Lin, please tell me what happened in detail. Maybe we can find some important clues." "About 15 minutes ago, I was sitting in the seat next to me, studying the spell model of the new magic, and then I saw a dagger stabbing towards my neck." Lin roughly recounted what happened before and after the attack, but made some changes and deliberately ignored the fact that he used psychic magic to retrieve his memory. After hearing the whole attack, the wizards present shuddered. They only knew that Lin was attacked before, but they didn't expect the process to be so thrilling. This kind of sudden attack without any signs is impossible to defend against, not to mention that the attacker has a weapon that can instantly break the mage shield in his hand. No wonder 3 counselors died inexplicably at home. Lower tried to put himself in Lin's situation, and he was frightened and broke out in a cold sweat. If the person attacked was himself, he would probably have become a corpse now, but this time the attackers obviously chose the wrong target. This young wizard from the Sea of Mist is not easy to deal with. Lor had experienced this personally when he was in the port of Yaita. Master August, do you know what kind of magic that can avoid sights? Lin En asked curiously. It's probably polarization magic, or shadow magic. In addition, a small number of psychic magic can also make people hallucinate, August said thoughtfully. Not many people can use these magics. It's a very important clue. Are there any suspects? Lin En continued to ask. 3 counselors died in 2 whole days. It's not that the security team didn't find out anything, right? He encountered an attack for no reason. Although he was not injured, Lin En was still a little nervous. If his reaction was a little slower, the result would be unpredictable. These attackers are likely related to the doomsday cult that has become active recently, August said solemnly, because the counselors who were attacked are all 3 ring wizards who excel in the field of elements and have put forward many unique insights. From the information investigated by the security team, the wizards of the doomsday cult seem to believe that the elements themselves have life and consciousness, and hope that all wizards will give up the study, research and exploration of elements, and believe that this is the reason for the coming of the doomsday. Lin En was very surprised. Are these wizards all crazy? Elementology is the first major subject of magic, and most of the witchcraft models are related to it. This is tantamount to cutting off one's own arm. No, if they are looking for wizards who are proficient in elementology, then why are they targeting me? Lin En asked in confusion. He has not made any remarks related to elements recently. Professor, is it because your theory of gravity conflicts with those people's doomsday remarks? Lydia hesitated and said weakly. Lin En also realized this very quickly. He had heard from Lydia before that the so-called 5-star alignment and the fall of the moon in the doomsday prophecy could be refuted by the theory of gravity. He was correcting their doomsday speech and disintegrating the soil for the existence of the doomsday sect from the root. In this way, the other party did have a reason to attack him. Since you have always suspected that this matter is related to the doomsday sect, why don't you arrest a few believers and torture them? Lin En asked again. These wizards were openly promoting the doomsday, and they were just short of writing the label of troublemakers on their faces. After August's explanation, Lin En realized that he was habitually thinking about the problem with the thinking of his previous life again. Former wizards are a privileged class in Greenreal. If there is no conclusive evidence that the other party has violated the law, the parliament will face great public pressure if it arbitrarily arrests and investigates a former wizard. Not to mention that there are not a few people who believe in doomsday speech and elemental spirits. I am afraid that hundreds of wizards will be involved. Rash actions may cause greater chaos. But I can't care about so much now, August said thoughtfully. I have sent several security teams to track and investigate the wizards who spread the doomsday rumors, hoping to find some key evidence. Lin En nodded. The complexity of the situation exceeded his expectations. If it went wrong, this matter would most likely cause a turmoil that would affect the entire Greenreal city. That's basically the information I know. The matter is far from over. You must be careful these days. It's best not to act alone, August reminded solemnly, leaving several wizards from the security team to strengthen the protection of the manor, and then hurriedly said goodbye with the bodies of the 2 attackers and returned to the Sky Realm to see if he could find any new clues. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.